Whoops, I'm on mute. Sorry about that. Hey guys, how are we tonight? Yeah, I emailed you back there, Jamie. You're you're welcome to come up. I don't have anyone lined up to come up tonight, so that'd be awesome if you'd like to jump up at some point. Maybe just give me half an hour or 40 minutes to go through some of the main things I want to go through first, and then if you want to jump up, that'd be awesome. Sarah with the blue dress is here. How are you feeling, Sarah? Are you recovering well? You got it? Okay, cool. That's cool. No worries. So obviously I'm on a lot earlier than usual, which is going to be, this is going to be more the kind of time that I'm going to be going live for the foreseeable future. So I guess I may have to entice a few new people over here. We shall see. We shall see how it goes. I'm good, Sarah. I'm good. Oh, do you? Yeah, well, you see, something I just presume sometimes that this is really bad for most people in the US, but it's obviously good for us over in the UK. So yeah, for anyone that's wondering, yes, Wendi Adelson is a sociopath. Good night, everyone. That's all I have for tonight. But I guess I have to show you guys why I think she's a sociopath and why I think most people that have looked at this case would agree with that. Sheila is here. How are you? So yeah, obviously I'm going to be talking about the diabolical beast that is Wendi Adelson tonight. I've been covering this case for the last week or so, and it was good to have Shirley on last time because she gave a really good um, impression, I think, that a lot of people will have of this, which is that most likely Wendi is not going to be indicted, right? It's not going to be convicted because there's less evidence, less obvious evidence in regards to Wendi in comparison to Charlie um, and their mother Donna, who's in jail right now awaiting trial. And I think that is an accurate assessment. Um, but once you dive into the huge list of little bits of evidence about Wendi, um, the multiple red flags of her guilt and consciousness of guilt and consciousness of the events that took place that day when Dan was murdered, her ex-husband. I don't think anyone can have any doubt that she had knowledge of this, which is, of course, a different matter to whether there's going to be enough evidence for the prosecution to convince a jury, right? Um, based on all the information we have at the moment, it's almost entirely circumstantial. And cases can be proven just through circumstantial evidence. That is possible. And I think I'd like to do my bit in terms of making the argument, at least for the fact that Wendi was a part of this murder. There's almost zero doubt about that. So let's try and prove it. There's a few quotes that I put together that really stick out for me on this case, especially in relation to Jeffrey Lacasse and someone called Tamaro Demco. Tamaro Demco was apparently Dan's longest and closest friend. She was interviewed shortly, well, I think, was it the following day after the murder? Certainly pretty quickly after the murder. And there's a host of quotations from them that are interesting. Suzanne says, I feel sad for the kids, it's cruel. Yeah, so Wendi deprived Dan's parents access to the kids entirely from 2016 to at least 2021 or 2022, the best part of 6 years, from the period when the two hitmen were arrested. They were deprived entire access. In fact, Dan's parents, Ruth and Phil, have never once had alone time with the kids since Dan was murdered. Let that sink in. Hey Helen, how are you? So these are quotes from Jeffrey during some of his testimony, where he's referring to the way that Wendi treated him and the way that seemingly he was being played, almost definitely being played by Wendi to be set up as a patsy. Jeffrey testified that he essentially co-parented with Wendi for 6 months leading up to this. Yet she never contacted him for the first few weeks after Dan's murder, and then only through text messages. She actually never spoke to him face to face ever again. He said on the stand, really, really odd. The rigidity of no contact order looks very, very odd. Almost looks guilty to me. Really strange. She knows I care about these kids, driving them around in a minivan. Very, very strange. I've been tucking in the boys for 6 months, yet I don't hear anything. Lots of sociopathic stuff here. The ease at which she lies is very disturbing. Jamie says that he gave a clear picture of who Wendi really is. He sure did. He sure did. And his testimony was crucial. in painting the picture of who Wendi is. He says there is a public charismatic persona and a private persona for Wendi. He testified that he spent $2,000 in counseling trying to deal with his experience of Wendi. I think he said either he said this or his counselor said that they had concerns that Wendi is a sociopath with no sense of guilt or empathy. She never makes mistakes, yet she lies all the time. He testified that he thought he was manipulated by Wendi and was under her spell. He says it makes no sense. He says it does make sense that Wendi is an accessory and not the one to pull the trigger. Terrible spelling mistakes there, guys. Sorry about that. This is Tamaro Demco, who was interviewed shortly after the murder. She was actually friends with Wendi, although she was closer friends to Dan, lifelong friends. She worked at the same university as Wendi. In fact, I think she actually substituted for her weeks prior to the murder. She said, there are so many good reasons for Dan not to be around. She put him through hell for the last year and a half. Really strange that she never contacted me. I just covered a class for her a couple of weeks ago. And then she went on to say, I don't think any of the Adelsons would be the ones to pull the trigger. They would be smart. Pretty insightful, huh? Wendi is very good at keeping this close to the chest and redirecting. And she also said, a lot of interesting timings that don't seem right. Incredibly intentional. Seems like someone knew his routine. And then Luis Rivera, who drove the killer, Sigfrido Garcia, up to Tallahassee, testified that he was told that the lady wanted her kids back. Oh, hey, Hybrid. And you're free as well, Hybrid, if you're able to come up. I know you've got a few connection issues there, but if you're able, you're welcome to come up as well. I think Jamie's gonna come up in a bit. So many indicators of sociopathy. If sociopathy means anything, then Wendi is a sociopath. It's just as simple as that. Oh, perfect, Hybrid. Let me just copy that. I may just play that later. Excellent, thanks for that. Cool. Yeah, because I've got a few things to go through anyway. I've got a whole goddamn timeline here. And this is the thing with this case. There is the only way to really emphasize the horridness of Wendi is to go through so many pointers, which takes time. During one of the trials, when Wendi was being cross-examined, she mockingly laughed and told the jury that it's not my job to help solve the case. And she really means it. She really, really means that. Never have I seen a case where the relative of a homicide victim has made no pretense in any sense to let anyone know that they actually give a shit about doing anything whatsoever to help try and catch the killers. So you can take her words there as gospel. But it's all okay, right? Because as she said during trial, she was advised by her attorneys not to follow the case. There is ice water running through this woman's veins. Never mind being an advocate for the killer of your children's father. Hey, Christina. Hybrid says, there is so much info. It's a worthwhile deep dive, though, with satisfying bite to it. This bitch needs to go down so badly. Yeah, I probably still do sound a bit shit. I still have the flu, although I'm doing my best with the Lemsip and paracetamol. Yeah, Suzanne says, but it's okay because she has blue eyes. Yeah, Wendy made a point of telling Detective Isom within a few minutes of the interview, hours after Dan was killed or was dying, that when she purchased her bourbon, she remembered that the seller, the guy, told her how blue her eyes were. Kind of chilling, right? Just give me a second, guys. Send a message. Christina puts a mask on to be in chat. Hybrid says, I truly believe the best is yet to come. I'm dying to see how Charlie, Donna, Harvey squeeze through the next few chess plays. I think it's pretty much checkmate. I don't think there's many more moves. But I agree, probably some of the most satisfying footage is yet to come with Donna on trial and fingers crossed Wendi. And Harvey too, I hope. Yeah, so one of the shooters, I'm presuming it would have been Rivera. Rivero is Tuto, right? Which means owl in Latin, I think. He posted a picture of an owl on his lovely journey up to commit the murder. And of course, people have pointed out the fact that Wendi happened to have a shirt with an owl on it during the interview. Yeah, see, people are wondering if there's a chance Charlie will flip on Wendi at some stage. I think realistically, it's probably only likely once Donna is convicted. I don't think he would do it prior to that because that would just obviously seal Donna's fate, wouldn't it? Even though it's already sealed. I thought the owl Wendi was wearing was to do with owls symbolizing death. God only knows. I mean, you can believe anything with this beast. For instance, did you know that the bourbon that she actually purchased that day was called Bullet? Bullet Rye she purchased. And apparently, it was her first time buying alcohol in a year after living in that rental house. I mean, it's probably just all coincidence, just like the owl, right? But still quite chilling. Yeah, so hybrid is referring to Robert. Robert is the picture that I've got up here. Hold on. Okay, so this picture here that I've been using. Initially, I got the two brothers mixed up. There is a brother on the top left-hand corner that you can't see because of I've got Garcia there. He is Robert, the older brother, older than Charlie and Wendi. who has basically cut off the family for reasons that extend back prior to when this happened. So he had his own reasons to have issues with the family, but then it was compounded by what happened here to Dan Markle. And I know he's done interviews on this case. I've not looked into that in much detail yet, but from what I hear, he's apparently a really stand-up guy. So perhaps at one point, I'll have a look into what he's got to say. Wendy said that she doesn't drink. Yeah, Jeff said that she drank her dinner most nights. Sociopaths do imbibe a lot. Yeah. Well, just like Jeff said here, there is a public charismatic persona and a private persona for Wendy. And just like I went through on one of the previous lives, how many times did Donna implore Wendy of how good an actress that she is, how well she can perform, how she has seen her in action? You can do this. All her battle talk. And my God, wasn't that a performance during that police interview? Okay, so I've got a mountain of information to go through, guys, and I think the easiest way to try and do it is to go through it systematically, I guess. As close to a timeline as possible. And I guess the topic of this live is looking at the potential culpability of Wendy, right? That's the focus of this live. Hey, Jack of all trades, master of none. How are you? So I thought I would start off with just a really obvious question, which is useful. Who benefited from Dan's death? I know it's an obvious question, right? But it leads us to some interesting points, right? To state the obvious, the two hitmen and Katy Magbanawa benefited financially. Katy Magbanawa was the on and off girlfriend of Charlie, the brother, who had an on and off relationship with Garcia, the killer. Garcia was linked to criminal elements, Luis Rivera being one of them, and they were the ones hired to drive up to Tallahassee and murder Dan. So they benefited. Katy especially benefited by being the conduit between Charlie and the hitmen, right? She had a guaranteed financial crutch from Charlie and the Adelsons with potential lean-in power in the future, which was something that eventually, after the bump that Charlie and Donna, mostly Charlie, was extremely concerned about and was rather paranoid about Katy for this reason. She was a paid employee of Charlie's in name only. As per the evidence presented during her trial, she had two trials. Her first trial was along with Garcia. Garcia was convicted, and the jury couldn't decide on Katy. and then she was convicted during the retrial. Hysterically, she was offered deals each time, and she refused the deals each time. And as a consequence, she's serving life in prison without parole. And let's hope that continues. She finally decided to tell some of the truth during Charlie's trial when it didn't really make any difference to her because she didn't get any offer really. So that's why she's the idiot in this tale. So yeah, as per the evidence presented during the trials, she did no work and didn't even attend any workplace. She was continually provided gifts and financial benefits. For example, Harvey transferring a vehicle into her name. So times were good for Katy. Times were really good for Katy. But sometimes justice does prevail in life, and she went from this to this. Good job, Katy. Hey, Smiley. You'll be glad I'm covering true crime, Smiley. I'm back on it. Oh, Wendi sure benefited, all right. I'm going to get into that. Mm-hmm. Donna won the battle. You took the words almost out of the pages I've been writing. Smiley says, this whole family are beyond what is real life. They are so stuck up their own asses that they think they can get away with murder. Yeah, but happy days they haven't in the end. And let's just pray that Wendy doesn't either. Helen is listening while marking. Yeah, don't let it influence your marking. Yeah, don't be too harsh. Helen is a professional, no doubt about it. Okay, where were we? Wendy no longer had to worry about the legal proceedings regarding Dan's allegation of Wendy's fraudulent claim of assets, which potentially could result in her losing her job and, of course, all the high legal costs that go along with that. That was of benefit to Wendy, Dan not being around, right? That aspect. And Wendy now had what she had failed to gain in the previous year, sole custody of the kids and freedom to relocate to South Florida with her family. She did this within days after Dan's death. 3 days to be exact. 3 days. She would soon change the kids' surnames from Markel to Adelson. She even went as far as removing one of the kids' middle names because it was the same name as one of Dan's grandparents, I believe. So that was nice of her. Wendy was very quick to try and eradicate the entire family tree of Markel. Eventually, she would remove Dan's parents' access to their grandchildren for a period of time, 6 years, turns out. Wendy testified this was due to learning that Ruth and Phil had inquired about adoptive options. So this was when the two hitmen were arrested in 2016. Apparently, Ruth had inquired in regards to temporary fostering in the event that Wendi was arrested until other arrangements could be made, right? And Wendi, for this reason, took away any access whatsoever to the kids, to Ruth and Phil, Markel's, Dan's parents, and the kids' grandparents. Wendi and Donna no longer had to worry about Dan's motion to prohibit Donna from having unsupervised access to the kids. So this was one of the motions that Dan was putting through leading up to the murder. He was unhappy at the treatment that Donna was given Dan through using the kids as a proxy. Apparently poisoning the kids' ears with hateful statements about Dan. So he wasn't having it. And so he had put through a motion to prevent, I think, both Harvey and Donna having unsupervised access to the kids. So that was no longer a problem, right? Wendi, by all accounts, felt trapped in Tallahassee. This is especially clear throughout the communication from Donna and Charlie to Wendi and through Jeff's testimony. She was now free to finally move to South Florida, which she did within days. Wendi had previously written a novel. When did she actually write this book? I'm not too sure if it was before or after, guys. Which was about a human rights attorney stuck in a small backwater Florida town with her hapless Canadian husband. This book just mirrored exactly her life. She said in the introduction that this book was based on true life events. She would later deny this in court, saying that it was actually about a friend of hers. She also tried to deny in court that she was unhappy in Tallahassee, which is just ridiculous when you see some of the communication that was going back and forth. She was, and the legal proceedings, her attempt to try and relocate to South Florida and have sole custody. Donna had originally planned to offer Dan a 1 million bribe to allow Wendi to relocate to South Florida with the kids. So this was something that Donna was trying to organize with the family and through communication to Wendi. And as she said in her communication, this would come to 333,000 for each of the parties. Now the hit on Dan reportedly cost about 100,000. So quite a saving there for all parties, right? Donna, Harvey, and Charlie all benefited by no longer having the logistical issues of Wendi and the kids being based in Tallahassee. And like Jamie said earlier, Donna was finally able to prove that Dan hadn't beaten the Adelsons yet. And to win the war, she referred to ad nauseum in her messages to Wendi. Oh, so she did write the book prior. Thanks, Jamie. 2011. Okay. So 3 years prior to the murder. Wow. So they got married in 2006. They had the kids in 2009 and 2010. She wrote the book in 2011, and then they were separated in 2012. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the way that she processed and issued forth her divorce was quite something as well, which we'll get into. Hey, Carla Ray. Yeah, they are teenagers now, Smiley. So, by all accounts, Wendi apparently resented Dan's professional success and his educational background. Dan apparently had to warn friends not to mention Harvard in the presence of Wendi. I mentioned that they were separated in 2012. In July of 2012, Wendi empties the joint safe deposit and completes pre-divorce parenting courses months prior to the divorce. While Dan was in New York for a business trip, she informed him that she was leaving him. Then she vanished for days with the kids, took hundreds of thousands in cash, took most of the furniture. She even took a family heirloom of the Markells, which apparently belonged to someone who survived the Holocaust, which they never got back. Apparently, Dan was devastated by this and begged her not to. Fast forward to 2013, Wendi starts post divorce litigation seeking to change joint custody to sole custody, although this had already been decided in court a year prior. As I said, she was seeking to relocate to South Florida with sole custody. This was rejected by the court with prejudice. With prejudice, so it could never be examined again in that court. Wendy then testified in court years later that the relocation wasn't a big deal to her or Donna. She also stated that she expected to lose this, and that she was actually relieved with this decision. Bold-faced lying to the jury. And as I put up there in some of the statements regarding who benefited from Dan's murder, she has to have spent somewhere close to 100 grand in legal fees over the court battles with Dan. And you have to think much of that may have been funded by Donna and Harvey. Wendi refused to confirm how much during court. So, as I say, Dan refused to pay the divorce settlement due to what he alleged that Wendi committed fraud by concealing assets on her court affidavit. Dan apparently discovered after the divorce. The divorce was finalized July 31st, 2013. So he filed a motion with this allegation of fraud and contempt of court by Wendi. Wendy's lawyer had to drop off the case due to allegations of contempt. This was a few weeks before the murder. Dan had apparently told his good friend Tamaro Demco and some other friends, mutual friends of Dan and Wendi, that he was about to drop a legal bomb on Wendi. He was alleging that Wendi stole 500,000 in assets, and it's in the police report that Dan had told friends that he was filing a motion that could end up with Wendi losing her job and her law license. And according to Tamara, Wendi knew about these fraud allegations. In fact, Wendi testified in court that she actually knew of Dan's fraud allegations. February 14th, there was a motion by Dan questioning how Wendi could even serve teaching students at the university legal clinic due to her unethical legal practices. She even took half of the dining set chairs. Wow. Is Ben the older or younger of the two, Jimmy? The older, okay. Was it his bar mitzvah that the grandparents weren't able to attend, I presume? So let's talk about Jeffrey Lacasse, who was in a relationship with Wendi for somewhere around 6 months prior to the murder. He was quite settled in Tallahassee. I think he was a social worker professor. Even still, probably not quite up to the Adelson standards. He says he was looked down upon and ignored by Donna and Harvey. 5 days before the murder, Wendi tells Jeffrey about Charlie's 2013 plot to have Dan killed. Wendi tells Jeffrey this. She says Charlie had explored all options to take care of the problem. And as Jeff testified, he was thinking back. He thought it was either 15,000 or 50,000 that Charlie was going to pay to hire the hitman. He couldn't quite remember. Why would Wendi be telling him this, right? Some people think Wendi was perhaps trying to cover her own ass, looking ahead by telling Jeff this. He says that in June, and for anyone that doesn't know, there was apparently a attempt on Dan's life the previous month. So he was killed July the 18th. The two hitmen drove up in June, the month prior, but never went through with it. And in June, Jeffrey says that Wendi seemed extremely emotional and stressed out, crying suddenly for no apparent reason, without ever giving an explanation as to why. And then weeks before the actual murder, Wendi again relates to Jeff how upset she is to be stuck in Tallahassee. She actually says to Jeff the only escape for her would be if something happened to Dan. See, I've heard about this, but I've not looked into this as of yet. The Adelsons actually paid a hitman 50,000 in 2013, but the hitmen scammed them. Wow. Wow. Jeff testifies that Wendi is deeply deceptive and isn't very good at it. Tamaro Demco, I think, said during her interview that Wendi sounded happy and excited about her new boyfriend, Jeff, a month prior to the murder. Then suddenly, the day after the murder, Wendi said there is no boyfriend. As we'll get into, you'll see that Jeff was discarded pending Wendy's quick move down to South Florida. And as Jeff testified, Wendy never even said that she rebuked Charlie's hitman suggestions or efforts. And as you seen earlier, Jeff essentially co-parented with Wendy for about 6 months. He was very close to those kids. He testified about the time that Wendy insisted upon him and the kids watching a DVD on this broken TV, essentially an unwatchable TV. When he suggested that they use a different TV, she insisted that they did not. Really strange. She had to really plant the seed for this TV. Jamie says that's why they had Charlie ask Katy to hook up a hitman. He knew her, so less likely she'd run off with the dollars. Yeah, Charlie broached the subject with Katy in 2013, asking if she knew anyone that could rough someone up. So, leading up to the murder, Wendy acted like things were great with Jeff. He speaks about on the Monday leading up to the murder, so Monday the 14th, they went to lunch together up until 3 p.m. Things were great. Then he says something strange happened between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. when they attended an evening yoga session. He says that she completely switched on him, ignored him. And Wendy, and a lot of this he really just became aware of in retrospect, right? Um, or things became more significant to him in retrospect. But she was constantly asking him for the exact time that he was leaving Tallahassee, because he was due to leave Tallahassee for Tennessee on the same Friday that Dan was murdered, Friday the 18th. So she was always asking him for an exact time. Then after the yoga, where she was ignoring Jeff, and he says it was kind of obvious that they were breaking up, and he was walking away in the car park, I believe, and he says he was about 10 paces away from her when she called after him, asking, "Oh, are you going to be here Friday?" And started asking about other scheduling details. And then hours later, Wendi emails Jeff to never contact her. He was being set up as a patsy. The hitmen used a car that was almost identical to Jeff's in color and in size. Was this the day that Wendi was informed that the hit was going to take place on the Friday? Is that why she suddenly put her plan into action between 3 and 7 p.m., balled up Jeff, and then drop him? Luckily for Jeff, he actually left Tallahassee a day early and had a rock-solid alibi. But Wendi did her best to plant the seeds that he was a suspect during the interview on the day of the murder. And he was looked into as a suspect by law enforcement. Oh, you're all good, Jamie. Now, weeks prior to this, don't forget that Wendi actually texted Dan asking if he would be in Tallahassee on the Friday. They were able to check the phone records, and she had texted from in or near the home of Donna down in South Florida when she texted. Days before the murder, Wendi changes her Facebook profile picture from one with her kids to a completely different type of picture, a picture giving an impression of a single and professional woman. Jeff says that this was photoshopped by Harvey. Could be nothing, but it could be foresight of knowledge of the murder, anticipating how she wanted to be portrayed in the media. And this here can't fail to blow your mind in relation to this case. It wasn't just Jeff that Wendi brought up the fact that Charlie had brought up buying her a TV because it was cheaper than hiring a hitman. This apparent joke. She brought it up to 3 different people on at least 3 different occasions during the week of Dan's murder at the hands of a hitman. To Jeffrey, to the actual TV repairman that came out on the morning of the murder, and to Detective Isom during the police interview. Was she wanting as many people as possible to be aware of her poor victim status? How bad must Dan be if my brother is joking about a hitman? Okay, I just want to play the beginning of the interview. Seeing as we're going through the timeline here.
What happened? but their love soured, turning into an ugly divorce with squabbles over child custody. Friends telling us Markel described the day she left him as his pearl.
Okay, so again, this is at 2:46 p.m. Dan was murdered at 10:51 a.m. So this is 4 hours later. At 8:50 a.m., Dan drops off the kids at the preschool. He goes up to the Premier Health and Fitness Club at 9:10. He's there until 10:40. And then he's murdered 10 minutes later back at his home on Trescott Drive. Wendi has been picked up from the Mosaic restaurant where she had been since just after 1 p.m. She left her home about 12:15, and as we know, she drove up to Trescott Drive, doubled back, went to pick up her bullet bourbon on her way to Mosaic.
Harbor.
I just listened to my voicemail.
What'd you hear? Who was your voicemail?
It's from Lisa Carey, who is my real estate agent, or who I had gone.
So just think about this, guys, okay? We now know, and Wendi eventually admitted this during one of the second trials, that she did in fact drive up to the police block. So that confirms that she was literally within a few houses of Dan's home. There is no way she was not aware something major had happened in the vicinity of Dan's home. She did nothing to find out if her kids were okay or if Dan was okay. And she has just listened to a voicemail of a friend worried after hearing that there's been a shooting on Trescott. Why is she not beside herself with worry right now after hearing this voicemail? Because she knows, right? She already knows.
To find a house. She just said she was driving around town and she heard there was a shooting on Trescott.
Yeah, that's what this is about. I'm sorry you had to hear it that way.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if I should.
It's all right, just leave it there. Is it still on?
It's right there.
Do you want to just hit play again for me?
Sure.
Hey, it's Lisa Carey. It is Friday, and I feel like an idiot doing this, but I just heard that there was a shooting over on Trescott, and I promise I'm not trying to be dramatic or even nosy. I don't know, just checking on you, my friend. I hope all is well. I hope your sweet boys are well, and if there's anything you need, let me know. It just ran a chill down my spine when I heard that there was something going on Trescott. All right, 212-3083.
Ask yourself as well, she's been picked up by the detective. She apparently hasn't freaked out at any point. As I say, she's already seen the cops at Trescott. As a parent, and especially an attorney, would you not be demanding answers before now? And especially after hearing this voice, what is going on? And remember, during the first 20 minutes of this interview, she doesn't once ask after the welfare of her kids.
hope all is well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
That's all right. You can stop it. Or does it stop automatically?
It's done.
Okay. Do you have your identification with you? All right, so you never took the last name of Markle?
No.
She later said that she was worried in the police car that she was a suspect. Clearly, what's at the forefront of her mind is that she's not a suspect, rather than whether her kids' lives have been destroyed.
Adelson. Okay. Wendi with an I. Joe. All right. There was a shooting at your home, or your ex-husband's home, at 2116 Trescott.
Did you see how quickly she nods there when he says there was a shooting at your home, at your ex-home? She nods her head instantly in agreement.
There was a shooting at your home, or your ex-husband's home, at 2116 Trescott. Okay. Your ex-husband, Daniel, all right, has been taken to the hospital. He's not going to survive.
Oh my God.
And now the performance kicks in. How to act like a victim and an innocent victim. Right, suspect for what? She didn't know why the cops brought her in. Why was she thinking she was a suspect? In the car. Suzanne brings up Dalia. What's her name again? Dalia DiPolito. I think Wendi is marginally the better actress than Dalia, but not by much. Although, without all the information, she's probably quite convincing, right? She definitely convinced the detective. Wouldn't one of the wouldn't some of the questions at the forefront of your mind right now be, oh my God, are my kids okay? Did my kids see their father gunned down? Was he shot at home? I need to make calls.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mom.
Of course, she knew the kids weren't there, right? She knew that they were at preschool. Information was passed to the hitmen of Dan's plans that day, where the kids were going to be. So of course she's not concerned about the kids. She knows they're safe.
I got a message from him this morning. What happened?
Well, before we get into everything, I have to establish where you were and who you were with and so forth.
Okay.
Okay, and then once we've established all that, I can give you more details.
Okay.
Do you understand why I wanted you to come here before I discuss this?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
That's okay. No, you have nothing to be sorry about.
I just don't understand. How could this happen?
Can you let me get over this hump, okay? Can we do that first? All right. Can you tell me what time you left your house this morning?
Yeah, I was there. I didn't leave this morning. I didn't leave until noon.
Okay.
Oh my God. And I tried to drive up Trescott and I saw that it was blocked.
It was blocked at some point. I'm not sure what time it was
And I
blocked.
just thought, oh, there's maybe some trees down or something. Cause sometimes
Oh, you're saying as you drove down which one of the side roads?
when I'm going to a friend's party tonight and it's a oh my God, what am I even talking about? I needed to buy, it's a stock the shelf engagement party, and so I went to buy bourbon.
Okay.
So I went to drive from my place up Trescott to get to ABC Liquor, and it was blocked, so I just turned around. I was on the phone at the time. I wasn't paying a lot of attention.
Right.
So I just turned around and drove up the other way. I just thought, oh, sometimes there's...
So one of the cops that was at the roadblock knew Wendi, knew her car, the car she drove, and was able to testify and say that Wendi drove up and immediately stopped and turned immediately, and turned back the way she came, which was in contrast to most of the other vehicles that were coming up. There was something very urgent about her, getting the hell out of Dodge.
When I lived there were electrical things
Okay.
that would happen. I left my house around 12:15 because I thought I'll get the bourbon and then I'll get some gas for the car and maybe get super glue for one of the boys' toys. And I was trying to do all I can before meeting my two friends at 1.
Okay, who was at your house this morning?
The only person that was at my house this morning was the guy from Best Buy because my TV was broken and it's under warranty.
Good for you.
Yeah, I figured.
Okay, a guy from Best Buy was at your house to work on your TV?
I have his name and everything at the house if you
Okay.
want it, because the boys broke the TV, so he gave me a choice of fixing it or getting a new one. And
What time did he come to the house?
he called me at around 8. He was probably there until around 10.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. And then you
and then after he left, I kept working on a paper, and I emailed the paper to a librarian at school to work on some of the citations.
okay.
And I don't think I talked to anyone else, but
I don't think I talked to anyone else. You just heard her say that, right? Well, notice what she does not mention here. She's mentioning things like, I emailed the school, that's, a paper that I needed citations on. But she doesn't mention the fact that Dan himself called Wendi at 9:02. Wendi doesn't mention that. She let it go to voicemail, never bothered to call Dan back, but we now know that she did listen to the voicemail straight away. This was at 9:02, so this would just be 10 minutes before Dan was going into the health gym. So no, she doesn't call Dan back, but what she does do is call Charlie at 9:19, and they speak for almost 20 minutes. She doesn't mention that during this interview either. She also texts Charlie saying, "This is so sweet." And then she deleted that. She also deleted a reminder she had on her phone for the TV repair. The TV repair which Donna had set up for her and had texted Wendi that morning to let her know the details of when the TV repairmen were going to be there. Right? She didn't want to be on the phone with Dan while he was killed. Yeah. She says during her testimony in court, the 20-minute call with Charlie was all about, the TV, whether to keep the TV or whether to get it repaired, whether it was worth it. 20 minutes. So the call with Charlie ends roughly about an hour before the murder. And then Wendi tries to call Dan back almost 3 hours later at 11:42. Obviously expecting no answer because he should be dead by that point, right? She never mentions during the interview that she had a call from Dan, heard his voicemail. She probably knew the kids were also at the preschool through his voicemail, I would assume. Good chance, right? No, she doesn't mention that she tried to call Dan back either. Interesting, right?
Just working for an hour or so from the house. I was going to take a shower, but I didn't. I ran out of time.
Smiley says, "There's a good few folk over on Daniel Bishop's channel that are following this case. I hope they see your live, Rabid." You never know. I don't think many people are going to see this live, but who knows?
Laundry, and then I left the house around noon.
To go to the liquor store and the stuff for the party?
Yeah.
Okay, you went down which road you said?
I went down Trescott.
Okay.
I saw a police car there, and I just thought it was blocked, so I just turned around and drove to, I went down the rest of Centerville, went up Benton across, went to ABC Liquors, bought the bourbon.
I'm a little confused. You're up on Centerville Road. What's your purpose of driving down Trescott?
It's usually the shortcut to get to Monroe.
To get to Monroe?
I usually take it as a cut through to get to Thomasville or Monroe.
Okay, all right, so you...
I don't know why I said Monroe. I was thinking Mosaic, Monroe, Thomasville.
Okay, so when you come down into town on Centerville...
I almost always cut through Trescott.
Trescott and just drive by your old house?
Well, I do it as a way of, like, coming to terms with the divorce, but yeah, sometimes I drive...
Can someone explain to me why you would be driving past your ex-husband's home as a way of coming to terms with the divorce? I guess I could kind of understand it if the separation and divorce was not your own choice, right? If you were somehow bitter about that. But she was the one that wanted the divorce, like Jamie says. She despised Dan. Despised him. How... I mean, it's just nuts.
Drive there. If I'm too sad, I drive around.
Okay.
If the kids aren't home and I know they're not home.
And this is the thing about this. The argument for Wendy's culpability is there's not really any single one smoking gun bit of evidence, right, that is decisive. It's the accumulation of the mountains of red flags that make it completely almost impossible for her not to be a part of this, I think.
feel better about driving by the house. But yeah, it's shorter, and I just usually drive by.
It's shorter than going all the way down to Benton?
All the way down Centerville and around Benton. It's just a shortcut I always took.
Okay, so you turned around and went back to Centerville, I take it?
Yeah.
Down to Benton, and went to the liquor store down there on Thomasville?
Yeah.
The one at Benton?
And even this detective, who's clearly, you can tell, kind of rooting for her being innocent, an innocent victim here, even he is rather perplexed at her driving up Trescott Drive.
Road?
ABC
Even he can't deny the obvious.
Liquors, it said, yeah, Benton. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Did you make a purchase there?
Yeah.
And that was sometime after 12?
Probably 12:30.
Okay. All right.
And I talked to a guy there because I don't really buy much alcohol, and so they wanted bourbon, and I asked the guy, we had a whole conversation about bourbon and
Right.
my eyes, like,
Your eyes?
he just said, your eyes are really blue,
Right.
and
You have contacts?
I do.
Okay.
But I just remembered it.
Right.
So I bought the bourbon and got some gas on Thomasville and met my friends at Mosaic.
Which gas station did you go to on Thomasville?
The one that's, I always forget the name, but the one that's close to the cross street, it's right next to the Goodwill.
Okay.
If you're heading north on Thomasville. If you're heading north on Thomasville, it's on your right.
Okay. Just past the Goodwill
Just
place?
past the Goodwill. It's close to the intersection there.
Okay. All right. And then from that point, you went straight to the
Went to Mosaic
Mosaic restaurant?
and met friends there. I used to have kind of a steady Friday meeting, and I hadn't seen my two friends in a while. And so we had made plans to meet up.
What time did you get to Mosaic?
About 1. I was a little late. We were supposed to meet at 1, and I got there a few minutes after.
Okay. All right. I know it's cold in here. Okay.
I think that's not why.
Okay. I know it's part of it, but do you know anybody that would have a beef against your ex-husband?
So I think this is the bourbon that she purchased, something, this brand, Bullet Rye.
He's, oh God.
I hate to ask it now, but I have to do it now. You understand, right?
I understand. He had friends. He always meant well, but he would sometimes rub people the wrong way.
Okay.
But not anyone who would do something like this.
Anybody that he owes money to?
No, he owes money to me.
He owes money to you? Okay.
Not me.
Okay. All right. All right.
Oh my God, we're poor kids. Oh my God.
Would you ever ask someone to do something like this?
Not in a million years.
Okay. Do you think someone would do this for your benefit without asking you?
No.
What good does it serve?
I made my brother, the one, his name's Charlie, the one I'm really close to, he makes a lot of jokes in bad taste, and it was a joke he made. He bought the TV for me this morning that got broken, and then I was talking to him about whether it made sense to pay to fix it or whether I should get a new one, and it was always his joke that, like, he knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always his joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV.
Hey, Pussycat. Fake cry indeed, yes.
I mean, he would never. he's my big brother, and he's been taking care of me since I was little, but he would never. And I told that to the repair guy this morning.
Right. That's okay.
I said, he asked me how much it cost, and I said I didn't know because it was a gift, because my brother said it's cheaper than a hitman. It was my divorce present.
Again, just to reiterate, like she just said, she told the repairman about the TV joke, about the hitman. She's now telling the investigator, and she told Jeff this same week, on top of telling Jeff in the past prior to this. You have to ask yourself why. Is it entirely to cover her own ass? Is it to make sure she paints herself as this poor victim and Dan is the bad wolf? That has to be so bad that her own brother is making jokes about hiring a hitman. And then there's the small point of the fact that Dan has literally just been murdered by a hitman. And of course, Charlie is now convicted of hiring the hitman. Is it normal to give divorce presents? I never got any. Yeah, well, I've never been divorced, but I wouldn't be expecting presents.
Such a horrible thing to say. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But even my family, who felt like I had been mistreated, would never do something like this. Never.
Well, you guys have been divorced for over a year. Has there been any type of abuse in that time?
Of him towards me?
Yeah.
No. It's, he's litigious, and we have an ongoing case because the house, it shouldn't be in my name anymore, but when we settled the case of our divorce, he said, one of the agreements the court said was, Danny wanted to stay in the house. They said, you can have the house, but you need to pay her half of the amount of what the house is worth. And he agreed to it, and then months passed, and he just never paid me. Okay. And so we have ongoing litigation where I filed.
And the reason for the ongoing litigation, according to Dan, is because he discovered after the divorce that she had fraudulently failed to claim assets. He was accusing her of stealing up to $500,000 in assets.
The motion in the court to have him pay me what he said he would, and he filed a counter motion for sanctions against my attorney because he thought that she did something wrong, which she didn't. But so, I mean, she withdrew from the case and was going to serve as a witness. I mean, she's not going to lash out at him for it. She's using the legal process to do it. My parents are, very angry towards him. But
okay. So just to go through some final points, and then I'll drop the link for anyone that'd like to come up. Let me just take this off. Okay, so Wendi offered to hand over her phone to be scanned during this interview. Is that because she knew she had no texts or emails that were going to be incriminating? And apparently, there is a suggestion going by the latest trial and what the prosecutor was saying that she was under the impression that WhatsApp messages would not be visible. And obviously WhatsApp is heavily encrypted, but I don't know if it's possible in certain circumstances to be able to obtain information from that. I'm not sure, but there's a hint that something might be traceable from that. Not to mention what's going to be gathered from Donna and Harvey's devices. I think on the last live we were talking about when Donna and Harvey were arrested. I wasn't too sure if they got Harvey's devices. They actually did. They had his phone as well. So that'll be interesting to see what comes of that. We'll find out during Donna's trial. Then later on in the interview, you see Wendi talking to a victim's advocate, and she's crying about how she's going to tell the boys about Dan's death. Just seems way too prepared to be genuine. Then Wendi ends up calling Donna on speakerphone, and she seemed extremely hesitant about it, very nervous. Donna also sounded really scripted on the call. Never showed any sympathy for Dan. And then Wendy's demeanor through that call was in stark contrast to how she was throughout the rest of the interview. She was attempting to be very calm. I think she was incredibly nervous. She also mentions in an interview talking to her kids days prior to the murder about acceptance of death to the kids as being a part of life, which was really weird. She also says to the detective that the murderer should get fully punished unless it's a family member. Then she lied in court denying that she said this. She also said to the detective that she wants to make sure that Dan's family has access to the kids. But of course, 2 years later, she deprived the grandparents of any access. She also failed to contact Dan's parents about this shooting. She never visited Dan in hospital. This interview ended when Dan was still alive. He was still alive until the following morning. And then, of course, she tries to implicate Jeff, as I mentioned earlier, through this interview. And I spoke about Tamaro Demco, who was interviewed shortly after this. She says that the day after the murder, and bear in mind, she was good friends with Wendi, as well as being extremely close friends to Dan. She says that Wendi never contacted her in the aftermath of this. She showed a lot of concern during her interview that the Adelsons were behind this murder. She said that she showed up to Wendi's house the next day unannounced because Wendi never contacted her. She said when Wendi opened the door, she was fairly calm. One of Wendi's other friends was kind of guarding Wendi, not letting her really speak to anyone. She said that Donna was there and acting really inappropriate, and that Harvey couldn't even look Tamara in the eye. Yeah, I think, did you mention that the other day about Snapchat, Jamie? Cool, Smiley. And you have to ask yourself, how did the hitman know that Dan was leaving the next day? How did they know of Dan's plans and movements on the morning of the murder? Like the fact that the boys would be at the preschool. Obviously, Wendi would be the best source for all this. Rivera, one of the hitmen, testified in court that he was told the lady wants her kids back. And the obvious question you have to ask yourself, would the Adelsons really order the hit without confirming with Wendi first? She is the mother of the boys whose father was about to be killed. Then on the day of the murder, according to Rivera's testimony, when they called, I presume Garcia called Katy to let her know that the job was done. Before they even said anything, Katy said, "I know," instantly. Wendi is the only person who could have known and communicated this news, right? Probably via Charlie, who would have passed it on to Katy. And then there's the fact that Wendi left Tallahassee 3 days after the murder, while the hunt was still underway for Dan's killer. Rather than being easily accessible to law enforcement, and then you have the fact that Wendi called Dan's life insurance company within days of the murder to find out if she was going to be a benefactor. Tamara set up a GoFundMe for Dan. And Wendi tried to attain the GoFundMe donations directly, claiming to be Dan's widow. She also claimed death benefits from the university. Wendi has never brought the boys to Canada to visit Dan's grave or meet any of the Markel's extended family. As I said earlier, she disinvited the Markels to Ben's bar mitzvah after learning of the hitman's arrests. And there's the fact that the grandparents, Ruth and Phil, were denied any access to the kids until either 2021 or 2022. But from that point on, the only time Wendi would allow visitation from them was during testimony periods in court, which abruptly ended after testimony. So obviously not for the welfare of the kids, right? It took Florida legislator to enact a new law to allow the grandparents access to the kids. That's how bad it was. And yet, just to answer your question, Smiley, even with all this information, she could very well still walk free. Yeah. And you know it'd be a travesty of justice if she was never held to account for this. So yes, Wendi is a sociopath.
And spell your name.
My name is Jeffrey Lacasse.
Any questions? So before we listen to Jeff's testimony here, I'll put the link in chat for anyone that'd like to come up and share their thoughts. I think so too, Jamie. Georgia still has cards to play against Wendi for sure. And don't forget, guys, the prosecution has named Wendi an unindicted conspirator. They would not do that if they did not intend for her to be arrested at some point. We can only analyze it based on the information through the trials so far. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
You're feeling better, I hope?
Yeah. I mean, I've not been too bad. It's just annoying, you know yourself, with the flu.
Yeah. Well,
Takes
I
your.
I first became aware of this case, oddly enough. I won't go into it, but I was involved with a sociopath for years, and I ended up in counseling because of it when I got rid of him. And so I could probably recite the traits of a sociopath. You know, my dog is now jumping all over me. You know, they're ruthless, they're goal oriented, and they're ruthless in those goals. They're devious and deceptive. They want to dominate. They are easily irritated and angered. They have very irresponsible decision making. They're not very well socialized. They have superficial charm. They have a broken moral compass. I mean, I know them all. And my counselor was actually the one. I was in counseling when Dan Markel was murdered. And my counselor was the one who told me, I think you should follow this case because these people killed him, and the wife is a sociopath. And that's how I came to this case. So it's really kind of an odd circle. And I'll just tell you the most interesting thing to me about being involved with a sociopath is that when I when I walked in and cut him off and said, "We're done. You're off my everything. Get
Mhm.
out." He looked at me and he said, "How can you be so good?" See, and that's really indicative
Mhm.
of how they think. They know, they're aware that they're awful people, but they can't help themselves. They
Mm.
are totally self-absorbed, and other people only exist for them to toy with and to win over.
Do you
So
think people? Do you think
go ahead.
people like that though? Do you think that they believe though that they may know that they're um brutal. Like they might see themselves as brutal warriors, right? But do you think that they believe that they're justified for some strange reason? Like in their minds, they believe there's a justice for it because this other person did this and did that. They just never see what they themselves have done to other people. They're not capable of seeing what they've done to other people because they lack empathy, right? So they're
Right.
only attuned to how they feel,
Well,
you
yeah,
know,
other people's
their own
feelings
heart.
don't matter.
Right.
They don't matter at
It's
all, and they get they love to toy with you. They run hot and cold on you because they have a short attention span. So you hold their interest, and then something else comes along, and then that gets their interest. And then when they get caught doing that, then they turn their interest back to you to placate you and keep you hanging around because they like messing with you. And
mhm.
it's just a game. And I think the synapses in their brain that would fire the correct response to people and interaction with people are missing. I just don't think they have them because they aren't wired the same as other people.
I agree. There's something missing, right, that most of us have, I think. And
Oh,
I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of us are so interested in true crime because, as I've always said, these people are not aliens that we observe in some of these cases, right? They're part of the human race. And I believe we meet some of these traits all the time. Like you're just referring to some of your own experience. You recognize some of these traits and some of these behaviors. It's just we don't usually encounter people that kill others, right? As a consequence of their insanity. But we
right.
certainly
Not
recognize a lot of the traits. And I think that's why a lot of us are interested because we
well
recognize
because
some of
it's
it.
so abnormal. It's hard to
Say it again?
relate to for people. It's so abnormal. Sociopathy is so abnormal to us that have empathy and that aren't afflicted with this. And I do think they just can't help it. I think they're born that way. And not all sociopaths kill,
Hmm.
but I can spot them a mile away now. And the counselor said that I'm exactly the kind of person that attracts because I'm very empathetic and very caring and outward and
Yeah.
giving. And so
Yeah.
he spotted me and went, bingo. And
Right.
he messed with me for 15 years. And it was the similarities between Wendi and this sociopath that I know are just incredible.
Hmm.
And some of the things that really, like the first thing I ever noticed is how abnormal her responses are. Like just when they pull her
Yeah.
into the interview,
Yeah.
she says so many socially awkward things that aren't fitting that situation. You're being told your ex-husband has been murdered. I have an ex-husband, never thought to kill him, but if I heard he was murdered, I would be aghast. And if he had custody of my young children at the time, I
Hmm.
would be saying, I'm not sitting here, get me to my kids. That's what I would
Right.
do.
Right.
It wants to sit there because it's the Wendi show. So she stays for hours and everything she says is so inappropriate. You know,
Right.
she um she doesn't, like you said, she nods immediately like she already knows. She thought she was being treated like a suspect
Hmm.
when she didn't know there was any crime committed,
Yep.
you know. So
Yep.
there's lots of indicators, but when she talked about the guy complimented her eyes, that's the sociopath ego. It's all about me. He noticed my eyes and we had a little conversation. you and I would not think to relay those details.
You'd certainly forget about it pretty rapidly, given the
Yeah,
circumstances, right?
yeah. And she's sitting there and she had so many prepared excuses or reasons for her behavior and put in way too many details. So she had planned all those statements about, oh, she was working on the paper and she had to send the citations to the university, and then she ran out of time to take a shower and da 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 da. She had and the route she took, and it's not a shortcut, and he recognized that. And I do not think for 1 minute that he was buying that she was not involved. I think he knew from the get-go.
I think he certainly had doubts. I mean, I have said that I thought that he was kind of rooting for her, but I'm sure it's never quite that binary, right? I'm sure like there's a shade going on there because he does press her later on.
Well, and he initially he's treating her like someone he has to give bad news to. And a
Yeah.
normal person would be empathetic in that situation, but
Yep.
her response is to give this performance and then make all these really obtuse prepared statements about all her actions.
Yep.
You know, and that's I couldn't relate to anything she said.
And it's so interesting what she didn't say when she was relating to what happened that morning.
Exactly.
She specifically said she didn't talk to anyone. Dan called her, right? She didn't answer intentionally, obviously, but she listened to the voicemail straight away. Then she spoke to Charlie for 20 minutes. Then
Yeah.
she called Dan back, an hour after the murder. She didn't relate any of that. This is about Dan. Dan has just been shot. Yet she's talking about sending an email to her school regarding a paper. It's so like there's all these little things that just add up to make
Well,
it.
because they don't know how to. Sociopaths do not relate normally to people or situations. They don't respond normally in situations. So her response, being a sociopath, is to blather out all these details that kind of cover her own ass.
Yeah.
That's what she's trying to do. But
Everything about her interview was preemptive, wasn't it? She was
it was all
preempting everything.
planned. Yeah. Well, they're very manipulative, and they plot, because they're constantly self-absorbed with when they interact with people, they're assessing things differently than we would. So she sat down before this interview, before this murder, and planned, put all the steps in motion. What was I doing? What will they ask me? What do I say to them? Because most normal people, like if I got pulled in and somebody told me my ex-husband was killed, I'd be, what? What? I'd be in shock. And all the details that she blabbers out for 5 hours wouldn't be in my brain at all. My kids, and oh my God, what happened? What in the hell? Who did this? What happened? I would be maniacally in shock. And I wouldn't be able to recall and converse and tell the counselor, the little grief counselor, oh, I think we look alike. That was so abnormal. I think, so I'm fascinated by that interview. And my computer, I actually really have been deep diving into this case since 2015. And my laptop is at my son's. He's working on it for me. So I don't have I have a whole file on this case, but
Yeah.
it's just so I don't really have the access to all my points, but I do just think there's a couple things that I think the cops were on to her. That Detective Isom was on to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was feeling the same thing that Jeffrey Lacasse said about her, is that she is very, persuasive and manipulative, and because even he sat there in that interview of his first interview, and said, man, I look at her behavior and I would still go back to her today, even though I know all this, that she tried to set me up. And, that's how successful they are. And she told Jeffrey Lacasse, I lie all the time. I can't help it. I don't really know why I do it, which is
And
alarming.
Jeff's a smart guy, right? He's a very smart
Mm.
guy. He is a professor. He works in social work. He's done a lot of work in psychology, from what I gather. But he's a
Yeah.
normal person with empathy, right? And people with empathy want to believe the best in others, and that's why, like you're referring to your own experience, that people like that become ripe to be abused and manipulated by a beast like Wendy.
Yeah, and
No,
it's horrible. And how she just lies to paint herself as the victim. And Darren Markell never abused her. He outshined her. That's what her complaint about him was.
my from what I gather from what I've been reading about this, like she broke his heart, it seems, right? The way that she just ninjaed this divorce on him out of nowhere. I think he was genuinely devastated by that. But
Well,
then
and he did for a year try to talk her
that's
out of
right.
it.
That's right, yeah. And some people have wondered, why on earth did Wendy not just try and manipulate him down to South Florida as a way, and by giving him hope that they could stay together if they just moved to South Florida, right? And
Well, she
then
did
land the divorce.
She did that. She made him go down and interview at some university in Miami. And she tried that because she just, that's the other thing. Sociopaths only want to hang with people that already are familiar to them and are familiar of them, are acquainted with their tendencies, because that's their comfort, that's their little womb. My family knows me and they're all disordered, and that's where I need to be. And I don't think Wendy has many capacities. I read a review, somebody who was acquainted with some of her legal work said she's a terrible lawyer. Terrible. She may be smart, book smart, but she doesn't apply it correctly because she can't.
And when you watch her testifying, even before you know the, all the information, there's something in your gut that tells you that this person is lying.
Oh,
She's
the fear.
very, like, her whole body language and the way that what she says doesn't quite match her body language and things. There's something really obvious about her on the stand, and
Well, people. Oh, go ahead.
it's the fact that she's so self-assured in her bullshit on the stand that it's so gross to watch. I mean, it's sickening watching her on the stand,
Well,
isn't it?
she physically manifests the expressions and the body positions and the mannerisms of someone who's like a Hollywood actress who's being told to play the most naive, innocent person in the world. Have
Yeah.
your mouth partly open, have your eyes really wide, reach with both hands for my book, act like, and make hand gestures like I just kind of took a K turn. And it's nauseating. It's nauseating to watch her, because they just should flash phony, phony, phony on the screen, because it's such an artificial demeanor and performance. It's so obvious. But
I
she's
know.
not aware that it's obvious because she doesn't know what it's like to be innocent and portray it correctly. That's
Right.
the thing about sociopaths. My counselor told me that my sociopath was constantly seeking to me because I was so well adjusted. He was using me to learn how to portray himself normally to others. Isn't that creepy? That's creepy, but that's what they do. And that's what Wendy does. But she gets so hooked on efforts to manipulate people with her victimhood and with her lies and her accusations. She forgets that we're sitting across from her looking at her going, you are one messed up sociopath, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do think the way you could see it when she was testifying, the way she would change
Mm.
George's words, like I didn't throw up, or I didn't vomit, I threw up. And
Yeah.
you know, that's the aggression. They're
Yeah.
very aggressive in very shielded ways, you know, kind of camouflaged ways. They want to win every little thing, even down to
Mm.
words. And so that was really telling to me. And
Yeah.
so I was actually going back to my counselor and telling her the sociopathic traits I recognized in her. We talked about it for hours. We went to dinner. It was, but
It's
yeah,
fascinating to observe it, isn't it? That's always been the most interesting thing to me about true crime is you have a unique circumstance, right, where you almost always know you have information you never really have in other circumstances where someone is lying. We almost always know someone is lying because they're being
right.
interrogated and you know the outcome, right? It's we know it for 99% fact in this case with Wendy herself, right?
Yeah.
But being able to see someone in action with that knowledge is interesting, you know, because you can
Yeah.
apply it to your own experiences in life because these people are all out there
And
creating their own mini. Hmm?
they all share the same traits. So if you learn to identify them, you know, there's a sociopath checklist that psychologists use. And in my situation, I told him we needed to go to a counselor to try to save it because I didn't know what I was dealing with at that time. And so we go to this counselor, and then she wants to see him alone, and then she wants to see me alone. And she hands me this checklist that they use of like 29 traits or something. He had
Hmm.
20 of them. She goes, "My advice to you is run. Get the hell away from this guy. He's a bona fide sociopath." And so I wanted to learn about what that was and how I was duped by it because there were lots of things along the way through the years that I'd, you know, tilt my head at and go, huh? You know, the dog head tilt. And that were alarming to me here and there. But you know, we were older. I met him when I was 37. So he was already pretty accomplished as a sociopath.
Hmm.
And I was really naive about abnormal behaviors because I'm just so ordinary. You know,
Hmm.
I don't have any huge, well, I've had traumas, but I'm not affected psychologically with all these things.
Yeah,
So it was
you're
really,
well adjusted.
yeah, well, yeah, and because I had a really great set of parents. But you know, there were just a couple things I thought Tamara Demco and Jeffrey Lacasse were very perceptive, and Tamara reminded me of how I feel about myself now when analyzing a sociopath in a situation. I can totally relate to her, you know, and I wish I'd had a friend like Tamara back when I
Mhm.
was dealing with this guy.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Well, it's never too late. It's never too late to learn certain things in life. That's for
you
sure.
never stop learning. You know, there were a couple things I wanted to know if you noticed. You know, first of all, there was a podcast in 2016 that I listened to where Wendi was interviewed about her book.
Uh-huh.
And in this interview, she goes in depth about how her personality works, why she is the way she is, and what people think of her and how she deals with others. And it was so completely revealing that as I was listening to it, I thought, this is exactly what a sociopath sounds like
Can
when
you
they're
tell me
having it
more
under
about this?
control.
Can you tell me more about this book exactly? Well, or can you summarize what's in this book, this apparent tale that's about her, not about her? Because it's not something I've
Well,
looked into detail yet about. I just know the kind of bullet points.
well, it's supposedly a story about it's so similar to her life. It mirrors her life exactly. And she just changes the names of things. And supposedly the focus of her book in her mind was her work as advocate for trafficked women, and but really it's a psychological reveal
Yeah,
of years.
of
Now
herself.
she published the book in 2011, so she had been writing that book for a couple years.
Yeah.
And so she had been planning since probably about 2009.
Probably when the kids were born then.
Well, she said shortly after the kids were born, Dan didn't give her enough credit, didn't think she was, you know, she always got accolades for going to Brandeis and going to Cambridge and blah, 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 and being valedictorian. So this is a person who's used to being held in high esteem. And there's nothing that kills your esteem more than being a stay-at-home mom. And and it's the best thing I ever did, but I was never a stay-at-home mom. I worked 2 jobs throughout the whole time. But so the book is about her, a lawyer like her, advocating for trafficked victims. But all the details of her life are in there.
Yep.
Exactly, they're just renamed.
A Canadian husband, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not very subtle.
Oh no, in the Panhandle, it's North Florida State University instead of Florida State University. Yeah, everything is so
Hates the
transparent.
town, feels trapped
Yeah.
in the town she's in.
Yeah, but here's the funny thing. See, a sociopath wouldn't know that we would put that together. That we would say, "Oh, this is your autobiography, bitch," because they don't know they're being revealing. They're using, to them, in their mind, this is a manipulation tool. So that's what they're focused on, is telling the story to manipulate others to get their goal, of winning over people and fooling people and playing with people. So she doesn't realize that this book is a total revelation on how long she'd been planning it, how devious she is, how she isn't capable of love, how she isn't capable of much of anything, because Jeffrey Lacoste was more of a parent to those kids than she was, and she had to move back to Miami because she didn't know how to be an effective parent. But Donna, she even talks in this podcast about my mother, sometimes I love her and sometimes I hate her. And, but she's really good with the kids. So I'm really glad I have her to help me raise them, because she was a kindergarten teacher, so she's Donna was just raising those kids full time, face it. Wendi was off,
It sounds like she is basically maneuvered into a position to gently cut off Donna now, right? It sounds like she's ghosting Donna. She's telling her she can't have any conversation with anything to do with the case.
Well, that brings me to my biggest. I have a couple questions about this whole thing, but my biggest one is, I am really leaning towards believing that Wendi actually saw, when she knew her law degree was going to be pulled, her law license was going to be pulled by that motion Dan filed. That's what made it go from a nasty divorce to, we got to kill the guy. That, and Donna wouldn't get to see the kids. That pissed Donna off. So we have both these women with a major objective to murder him, a major reason to murder him. And so I truly believe, and I know there's evidence, that Wendi had prior knowledge, aided in the conspiracy by passing on information, but the whole family had always been protective of Wendi. So I wonder if they set up this whole thing to protect Wendi. Meanwhile, Wendi's over here, a total sociopath, thinking, screw them all. The first name I'm mentioning is Charlie's. I'm gonna put the scent on that trail for the cops to nail my family, because if my family goes down, and what happened, Charlie went down, and now Don's in jail. So now, what if Wendi planned this whole thing? Because they're very strategic and they're very smart.
Oh yeah,
they are smart.
So are you saying that Wendi was along for the ride and had knowledge of the hit to begin with, but then at some point decided to turn on the family?
No, I don't. I'm wondering if from the outset, when she saw that her family
From
was
the very
willing
beginning,
from these lengths, financially and efforts, and all the efforts and information and communication they had to have on plotting and planning and getting alibis ready and the TV distraction, all that stuff. They really think they planned this really well. But I'm wondering if Wendi from the beginning said, hey, I'm going to keep my hands totally clean and leave no evidence of my involvement. And that way, if anything ever leads to my family,
Mm-hmm.
I will be completely exonerated because there's no evidence.
Oh
But
yeah, I think she definitely did
and
that.
then they can, well, not only that, because the other thing about sociopaths is they love to take from you, and they love money, and they love power because money is power. And so, what if Wendi figured out, hey, if they all go down for this and I'm left standing alone, I inherit everything of all of it.
Right. I get the whole shebang.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I inherit the empire.
yeah. And she's the thing that gets me though is there were times when I looked sideways at my ex boyfriend and in social situations, like Wendi went to that bar mitzvah
Mm-hmm.
in a red low cut dress, boobs out, cleavage front and forward, and her son's head is even with her cleavage, and she's got her arm around him. His face is practically in her cleavage. Now,
Really?
you don't wear a red evening dress, cocktail dress showing your boobs to a bar mitzvah. It's a solemn rite of passage. There are norms for how you should dress at a bar mitzvah, and she broke
Yeah.
them all.
Yeah, you
And
don't try and take the center of attention at your son's bar mitzvah, I would imagine.
well, I had 3 sons. The last thing they ever saw, I don't think they've ever seen my cleavage. I mean, yeah, really, you have boys. You don't wear low cut things. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't. It's just improper. And here she was at a bar mitzvah that she knows is being filmed. They paid to have that filmed, like you have wedding videos. They have bar mitzvah videos. So she knew she was on film. So she puts on this low cut bright red, which is another no at a bar mitzvah. It's not very solemn, considering it's a rite of passage. And then have the girls out, it's just so inappropriate because it's
Everything.
all about her. That little boy standing next to her, that preteen or 13-year-old standing next to her, he's just an accessory in her life. He's not her son who she's bonded to. Her heart isn't, I always said once I had children, my heart left my body and walked around in theirs, you know? So my
Yeah.
heart's always with them. It's always about them.
Mm.
And I just explained that to my grandchildren the other day because my dad told them about that and said, "Why is your heart in our bodies? Or why isn't your heart in our bodies? Is it in Uncle Jeff's or Uncle Sam's and Uncle Alex's and Daddy's?" I said, "No, no, no. When you get grandchildren, your heart gets bigger. So I can put more of it in you too. So you're
Mm.
all walking around with my heart." So, but that's something a sociopath could never relate to. And I'm telling you, the woman standing there with her arm around that kid at that bar mitzvah has absolutely no um, understanding, compassion, or care about what her son has ever felt. And
Mhm.
certainly is feeling at that moment because he looks embarrassed as all get out,
Mm.
you know?
They are possessions
Yeah, well,
rather
and the
than
cool.
her children.
My that man I was involved with, he got married and divorced, and he had children because it made him look normal. But he
Mm.
was the most aberrant parent I've ever seen. He was completely inappropriate, not in weird ways, but he didn't know how to direct children's behavior. Just
Mm.
didn't.
Just
And
not
and I'm
capable of it, right?
right because they don't understand what normal behavior is, so they can't invest it into a child. And so when I was seeing Wendi at that bar mitzvah, I immediately thought of all the instances where I saw my ex interact with his kids, and I thought, huh? No,
Hmm.
no, 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 no.
Mm.
That's not right.
I
But
mean, can you imagine the life those kids are going to have? I know they're now teenagers, right? But they have to have one hell of a contorted reality being fed into their ears through the last 10 years. They would have to have had done, right? Um, like,
well,
what
not
is
just
their
their knowledge.
concept of what
Yeah.
happened here?
Well, not just their knowledge or lack of knowledge or understanding what really happened. Their personalities have been influenced by these people. And I find it's really troubling to me that Charlie was so close to Ben, the older one. He was so close to him.
You
And
said that, yeah.
Ben calls Charlie in jail. They
Oh,
talk.
really?
They talk on the phone.
Wow.
And now you and I both know that if somebody in our family plotted to kill somebody, the last thing we do is let our kid interact with them at all.
Mm,
You would put up a hard no on that.
mm.
So it's troublesome. So I think they're going to be really warped. And there is a day in their future when reality hits and the truth is discovered by them that it's going to be soul crushing.
It's going to be entirely life destroying, I would imagine.
I just,
The psychology of that.
I hope they have help,
Yeah.
because the number of lies. I was talking to my counselor and I said something really uncouth, but she got a kick out of it. I said, the day words come out of Wendy's mouth that aren't lies, I'll grow a schlong. I mean, she is such an obvious and persistent liar that I
Hmm.
can't even take it. But I know that they plot. They have devious plots and plans ahead. So I'm wondering if she planned that. And I also, the other thing is there's a phone call between, or there's on one of the tapes, I think it's the cafe tape between Charlie and Katy, where he's pressuring Katy to get her to find out who this cop, who the push guy is, the bump guy.
Hmm. The bomb guy, yeah.
Yeah. And he says, what if someone went to the police and said, my brother killed him? I know my brother killed him. He said that. Now, why would he say that? That to me is just, I don't think many people picked up on that statement of his. But what
Hmm.
it said to me is, what if Wendi goes to the cops and nails me for this?
Hmm.
I mean, there's snippets like this all throughout this case. There's hundreds of them. And if I had my laptop, we'd be on live for hours because there are so many like that. But
I
you've
was
got to
find
find.
I was finding it very hard to imagine how this woman could be any more hideous, but that what you've laid out there, that theory, that possibility, makes her even more hideous, and it does make sense. The dots add up to your theory, you
Well,
know?
I did run it by my counselor, and she said, I am sure as plotting and devious and how they enjoy self-centered gain. I am
Mm,
sure she looked at that aspect of how can I be the last one standing and get it all.
mm.
She goes, I'm sure she did.
You may well be right. I see Cheryl was in agreement with you. She says, I think she was part of the plan, but all along she made sure her hands were clean just in case. Um,
Well, and there is evidence of Harvey having prior knowledge because he definitely knew about the payoff
oh,
when the
yeah.
three of them. So I think Harvey could be uh, charged with conspiracy, but I think Wendi can too because I don't know if it was WhatsApp or Snapchat. I think it was WhatsApp, wasn't it? Anyway, whatever Wendi had, you cannot retrieve the messages, but
What's up?
you can diagnose, you can get their account information, their URL for that account, and you can find out information of who they talked to and when they talked to them. You can't see that what they said, but then the police could contact the people she was chatting with and say, do you have your Snapchat history so that I can
That's
see the
yeah,
content?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
So
right. Yeah.
I think there's a possibility there that Wendi could still be nailed. I also think her drive-by, I'm torn between whether it was to verify that it actually happened so she could call Charlie or text and say, this is so sweet. That text could have been about, just saw it, it happened. Um, Go ahead and pay him.
Hmm.
The deed is done. Or in her cruel, detached heart, did she just have to have a look-see so she could relish the moment and see it for herself?
Yes. It can only be one of those two things.
Yeah,
Either a
yeah.
crime scene check to pass on the information, or she just had to see the damage from the outside. You
Yeah,
know?
you've got to find. I'll see if I can find the link. Well, I can't. On my computer, I have the link to that podcast Wendi did where in 2016, where she reveals so much about her personality. I know you would really enjoy it because it's
Yeah.
you will learn so much from it. It's so revealing, you know. But she has all the telltale signs of a bona fide high, the people, everybody has a sense of self, but narcissists, that's a much higher degree of sense of self that is more destructive to others. Sociopaths and psychopaths, they're at the pinnacle of
Mm-hmm.
their destructive abilities towards others because we really only exist to amuse them and be used by them.
It can
And
actually be a hell of an advantage if your aims are quite narrowly defined to be a sociopath. You know, if your aims are defined by getting from A to B in terms of some hierarchy, whether it's in business or whatever it's
mhm,
in,
they're very
can be
efficient at that.
absolutely. And everyone knows about the cliche example of Steve Jobs apparently being a sociopath, right? And he's one of the most successful businessmen there ever was. Um,
Yeah,
they
because they
don't
don't mind
all kill
stomping on
people,
people. They don't mind stomping on people,
right?
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
because it's about what they want when they want it, and they don't care about others at all. Which is
Hybrid Hybrid says she'll be able to come up soon at some point and go through the map to show in South Florida where everyone is very close geographically. Yeah, and there's phone records as well that show their movements on the days leading up to and after the murder, which are just so undeniable in terms of Charlie and Katie's girl, and the fact that Donna drove down to Charlie's to drop off the money,
moldy money.
the moldy money. Yeah, she literally thought that she could clean the money, literally clean the money.
Well, see,
It's
Donna
so
is an elite. She's a very elite person. She's elitist. She's led a very spoon-fed life. So she really doesn't understand how the world works.
clearly,
So
right?
yeah, so and I'm thinking that she's probably going to score pretty high on the sociopath chart.
Oh, for sure.
Not as high as Wendi. Wendi is right up at the top.
Okay, a question for you. Do you think, because I guess this is the subtitle of this live, do you think A, she's going to be arrested, and B, do you think she will be found guilty based on the information we have at the moment?
I'm hoping that Georgia has access to, Snapchat, WhatsApp, whatever. But I
Mhm.
also think there is other evidence out there that she has. I
Yeah,
think Georgia is way too smart. And I don't think Georgia at this point will be satisfied until she gets Wendi.
yeah.
This is
I
now
hope so. I really hope
this
so.
is now game on.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Lacasse and Tamaro Demco gave a lot of information and a lot of insight into Wendi that gave them lots of leads that aren't related to his police interviews. That cannot Wendy's immunity doesn't cover that information.
That's right.
So any information they get by interviewing those other people, it can come in a trial against her. So I'm just hoping she gets charged. I mean, sociopaths are really frightening. Even months and months, like 7 months after I cut all contact with the sociopath in my life, he showed up at my door one day. And luckily I had the
Mm,
screen locked and he wanted to come in. I'd moved. And he said, well,
mm,
I want to see your new house. I saw that you moved and aren't you going to let me in? And I looked at him, and when our eyes met, I thought, because I have a lot of destructive information on him,
mhm.
and he's probably sees me as I could be a threat. And no one walks away from a sociopath. They keep coming. He showed up at my birthday party and out of the blue. It's weird. They want to keep tabs. She talked about
Oh,
me.
you're cutting out slightly, Jimmy.
I could ruin his life with the information I have on him not just being a sociopath, but the things he actually did.
Hmm.
And so he showed up at my house, and I remembered what that counselor said: get away from him. He could kill you. And I didn't let him in because that thought was in my mind. When our eyes met, I thought, this guy, he could do it. Look at those eyes. He's not here as, hi, how are you?
There's many of them that walk the earth, Jamie, without a shadow
Well,
of
over
a doubt.
5% of the population are sociopaths.
Right, which means millions,
Oh,
hundreds of millions.
yeah, yeah. Needless to say, I haven't dated since. Well, and I don't miss it. I just think life is so great right now. I've
Good.
kind of got it made, and I've got a nice dog. Well, and a dog. She's 85 pounds of. I always want to be in your lap, like entirely. It's crazy. But
The unconditional love of
yeah, my son
of
said,
your
"Why
dog,
don't you
right?
try a dating site, Mom?" And I said, "I don't really miss having a man in my life, and I don't really need a man, and I don't really want to have to go through the discovery process of getting to know somebody and have him turn out to be a sociopath."
Well, there are many advantages to being single, for
Oh, I
sure.
know. Yeah,
Any.
yeah. The only problem is I miss my kids because I have 3 boys. And I miss them when I have to lift something heavy or get stuff off the top shelves or open a jar. So I said, if you can find a man who would be content to be in my life to that extent, then I'll date. But you don't have to be with somebody. You should be with somebody that you can't live without, not just to have somebody.
Exactly.
But Wendi talks about how she didn't love Dan. She thought she could, what did she say? It was a really weird term. Like go against the odds or something and have a successful marriage without love. She wasn't really without true love. And I
She
thought,
comes
why would,
across as someone, I imagine, that would find it very hard to love anyone.
yeah, she doesn't. They aren't capable of love because love requires um
It literally
will-
requires empathy.
and
Like,
willingness towards others. You have to be willing you have to love
yeah,
apart from yourself.
yeah.
I remember my son said, "Why are you doing all this crap for your mother?" And I said, "Because she cares about it." And he goes, "Well, do you care about it?" And I go, "No, I don't give a shit." But she does. And I love her. So I'm going to help her. And it's that simple. That's what you do when you love somebody. Whatever's important to them becomes important to you. The only thing important to a sociopath, certainly Wendi, is Wendi and her well being and her future prospects. And God warn whoever gets in her path next.
Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about Charlie Adelson, the playboy, the fixer, the miracle worker. Because, like, I see him as being less so much this sociopath type like Wendi and more just a basic asshole criminal, I guess, right? Like some guy that thinks he's Al Pacino in this empire and he's
Well,
gonna
and
resolve his sister's problems.
rules
The
and laws are
maestro.
for everybody else. Remember when Donna got the bump note and she called him and he said, "Well, it's the IRS. I hope it's not the IRS." Yeah, he's a scofflaw in every regard. He cheats on his taxes. He gets paid in cash and doesn't report the income. He has all these shyster deals. He's always wheeling and dealing. He's probably scores high on the list too. Not as high as Wendi. Wendi is the sublime sociopath in that bloodline. But
Wendi makes everyone else look like Mary Poppins, though, doesn't she?
almost, almost. Charlie is just a skanky sleazeball. He is, and he wasn't even a good dentist. And did you hear that Harvey actually got sued because his bad dentistry collapsed someone's jaw and their face?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They aren't good at what they do. And there was an interview with a nurse that worked at an office that Charlie frequently visited, and she worked with him he showed up at her office for years, and she was a hygienist. And she said he was the worst dentist I've ever seen, the worst periodontist. He was horrible.
He
He
just
had
looks like
horrible
such
habits.
a douchebag. Like, can you see
Yeah,
the screen there? Yeah, him in his younger, high flying days. He's just such a dick, and it's so sad. I mean, look at this
that's
SpongeBob
who he is. That's
SquarePants.
who he's always been, that guy.
Yeah, and it's so
Yeah, just totally.
satisfying seeing him turn to this.
Yeah,
This is reality now.
yeah.
This is what's at the end of it all.
Charlie, the prison bride.
The prison.
Somebody's
Can you
gonna,
can you
somebody's
imagine what he's
gonna.
going through? Like the fear that must be in his mind being in there. I know he's probably protected well at the moment, but that's not going to last.
Well, I just read today that he where he's his new prison, he has to be protected and prevented from coming in contact with these specific 6 other convicts.
Hmm.
They're probably
Right.
Latin kings.
Think about it, right? His attempt to get away with this was to implicate the Latin kings as having extorted him in advance. It's the most insane defense I've ever heard.
On a pay plan.
Yeah, an installment plan, please, or we'll kill everyone else in your family.
I mean, that's so stupid. Who buys? See, but that again, their lack of awareness of what other people are thinking when they hear what they say, they
Yeah.
don't know how to process things like normal people. So they think, well, this sounds good. They'll buy that. Well, nobody ever bought that. And I can't believe that his lawyer, old Rashi,
Well,
bought it.
I was thinking about it, right?
Why would
And
he pitch that?
well, this is the thing though, but when you think about it, with the fact that they had the knowledge of what law enforcement had, right? The information that they had when they had a look at discovery and such things, this was kind of the only possible defense. There wasn't really any other defense they could come up with but to try and blame it on Katy and the Latin Kings. There was no other way to explain his actions and Donna's actions after the bump. You know?
Yeah, but he wasn't very good at convincing anybody because
Well,
it's
that
a
was the other
stupid
problem.
premise. It's a stupid premise right out of the gate. No one's ever heard of installment plans for extortion. That's not how they do it. Even the mob, give us the money or you're dead. You're sleeping with the fishes. They don't care about 3 years from now because that's obtuse to them. Well, the future isn't happening. This is now, and I want my money. There's no
Yeah.
way anybody would ever buy that premise. And Charlie, that's how abnormally socialized he is, that he doesn't understand that normal people are looking at him going,
Hmm.
what a goofball, sleazeball creep. You're just an
Yeah.
idiot.
Well, he has a very, and obviously very contorted impression of reality because he's had his things his own way. He's had a lot of success in life. That's all he's known. And he obviously has a very low opinion of others that, that are on the normal level in society, I guess, right? Or a very low opinion of criminals, jurors, just your average
They're
members
elitist.
of society. Oh, they
Yeah, they're
are.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. But the other thing in prison he has to worry about is the white Aryan guys
Oh, yeah.
because
Hmm.
he is Jewish.
Right.
So I mean, there's really a lot to be said for keeping your nose clean, minding your own business, and don't mess with other people. That's the way you can go through life and still end up in a really comfortable situation. But these
Hmm.
people had it all. And look at the nightmare. Their personalities weren't structured to handle it well so they could have a good life. They probably think they look back and had a good life, but not how it ends. That's really the measure of your life. You're in prison, dude. for murder.
It's extraordinary when you think about it, this case, just from if you stand back from the outside and look at what this family did to themselves through vengeance and hatred and hubris. And so many close members of the same family were capable of going along with this. Because make no mistake, Harvey knew about this, without a doubt.
Oh yeah, he wasn't probably it was Donna's idea to kill him.
Sure. Yeah.
It went from divorce him, and then once those motions were filed that would prevent her from seeing the kids unsupervised and threaten Wendy's law license, then it became, we got to kill this guy. And that was Donna who said that. And then she called Charlie and said, you know, some scuzzy people, because you hang out in the scuzz world, put it together. And Wendi was in on it too, because they needed to have her information. And she knew about it. But she immediately, the first name out of her mouth in that interview was my brother.
Crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
That was planned. Pardon me. That was a total plan to nail him. I'm convinced that she doesn't care what happens to the rest of her family. I mean, and she lied in this podcast she did. She said that it's hard to be when people hear that I'm the widow of a murder, the ex-husband.
She's not a widow. She tried to say this to get the GoFundMe. She wasn't a widow. She was divorced.
Oh, well, no, when she was sitting on a bench and with her kids watching her kids play in the park, and a woman sat down next to her and said, "Oh, you have such lovely children. What does your husband do?" And she thought, I don't know how to tell this woman. I don't think he does much because he's dead. Now, this woman said that on a podcast, not understanding how completely bereft of humanity that statement is. She thought of that.
The one quote that really sums it up for me with Wendi is when she said, "It's not my job to help solve the case," and the way she smiled so grossly as she said this in response to a question to the jury it just sums her up, you know?
Well, that's the coldest thing. If someone you knew or loved or were married to at one point, or who fathered your children, were murdered, I would get involved in trying to find out, even if it was my ex. I'd want to know, and I'd do anything I could to help with the investigation. I would never say those words.
And like you said, it's the fact that she just does not give a shit how that comes across to other people.
She doesn't know how it does. It's not that she doesn't care. She doesn't understand how normal people think and why anybody's jaw would drop at these statements of hers. But she said that when she tells people, she doesn't want to tell people her ex is dead because she gets less pity. They don't feel as bad for her when she does. Find out that when they find out that he's an ex and not her present husband, and that he's dead, they aren't as empathetic and sympathetic. And so she doesn't like to tell them that.
This is why Georgia just needs to get her into court and get her charged. And then once the jury get to observe her on the stand, hopefully on the stand.
I want Georgia to get an expert psychologist who's an expert in sociopaths to guide her, because the only emotion, they have a very limited number of emotions in their bag of tricks emotionally. Anger is the most predominant one. They are easy to irritate, easy to aggravate, easy to rouse to real anger. And if Georgia could figure out how to do that when Wendy's on the stand, that would be great, because Wendi would walk right through Georgia's trap and give herself away.
Yeah.
You have to handle him. My counselor was telling me on ways to disengage from that guy. And she said, you've got to understand how he's thinking and what his motives are as opposed to what yours are. You can't walk away. You're nobody to him, but you can't walk away from him. You don't mean anything, but he still wants you here to toy with. So you've got to figure out a way to communicate to him that it's done. And I'm not your toy anymore. Go away.
I like to. Sorry.
You can really once you learn how they think, you can entrap them into having emotional outbursts. And that's the one place when their instinct to say those things that nobody thinks should be said will come out. And if that happened on the stand, ooh, that would just be the
That
best
would
thing.
be the best thing, wouldn't it?
I would love to.
I like the way that Georgia cross-examined Charlie. Some people criticized the way that Georgia cross-examined her. I think people wanted her to go harder, but I thought she just hit it. She did it just right, I thought, because she allowed Charlie to exhibit his arrogance and his desire to feel like he owned the place.
Yeah,
Uh,
she gave him.
She
I think she
let him
handled
do
him
that.
very deftly because she would lead him to, like, when he turned around and said, he said, I can't remember the exact question, but she looked at him and she said, "Well, you had the information all these years and didn't tell your sister?"
Mm.
So she's really slyly, just calmly leading him down a path, and then she
Yeah,
gets a little more emotive with the gotcha. And I
yeah.
thought it was very well done. And I think Georgia I think every town needs a DA like Georgia because she's just freaking brilliant.
Oh,
And
they're
yeah,
both great. Sarah Duggan as well, the
yeah,
co-prosecutor, is fantastic. The way that she cross-examined Katy during
yeah,
the earlier trials
yeah.
was awesome. And sometimes the best way to bring out certain traits in someone that you want to be exaggerated or highlighted is to exhibit the kind of opposite, you know. So for all of Charlie's bombastic arrogance and desire of control, it probably benefited Georgia to be a little bit subdued, like you say, because it would contrast and exaggerate
Hmm.
his character to the jury, you know.
Yeah. And then
And
she
it may
come
be a
out
bit
with
different with
the,
Wendy. Like you say, there should be hopefully there'll be a different approach with Wendy to try and draw out her emotion.
well, I think the indifference response when at the end of her cross examination of Wendy, when, and then she said, no further questions. The dismissive
Mhm.
attitude, the indifference, oh my
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
what's the point of you being here? We see you.
yeah,
We know
yeah.
who you are and what you did. Get
Perfect.
out of here. I
Almost
got
kind of
nothing coming.
mocking her, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, and that I'm telling you, Wendy went to the car and started raging, because you don't do that to them. You don't minimize them. You don't dismiss them. That will get a flood of anger you can't believe. I've seen it and it's scary. So if Georgia can handle Wendy, God. I wonder if Wendy will testify in Donna's trial.
Good question. Well, she she refused to testify unless she was subpoenaed, right? So we know that she would have to be
Right.
subpoenaed.
Well,
Um,
and I think Georgia will subpoena her, but
yeah.
I never want to see Wendy again but I do. I want to see her
Oh,
go
I
down.
do. I do.
But every time I see a snippet of film of her in that interview or in that or on the stand,
Hmm.
Rabid, I want to actually slap her. And I'm like the most passive, nonviolent person. And I
No, I'm
actually
with
have
you.
this.
I'm with
I
you.
want to act. I wish if I could see her on the street, I don't think I could keep myself from walking up to her and just knocking her in the face.
She
That's
literally
how,
represents everything I despise in
yeah,
humanity. Everything.
yes. And they are a destructive force moving through society, and they don't care
No,
at all.
no.
She made the callous regarded him. She doesn't like to call him her late ex-spouse because it sounds like latex spouse. That is one of the coldest, most unconscious, indifferent kind of comments. If you said that to somebody, they would just go, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
It even annoys me the way that she chose to wear the exact same dress to each trial. You know, so conscious of her image.
Well, why doesn't she brush her hair then? Because her hair is never well done, you know?
I agree.
I'm not saying I want to updo or something. It doesn't look brushed.
Has she had something done to her lips as well? Her lips are very pumped out.
Well, because you know you have to bring them back to your face when you're walking around with your cleavage out.
Hey, Red Eye Jedi. Good to see you
I
again.
mean, I'm not a prude at all, but you know, I'm just appropriate. And
Yeah.
she's yeah. I don't even understand. You know, the funny thing was, now that you mentioned the clothing thing, when I first started dating this guy, he couldn't put outfits together. He owned an accounting firm. He was very wealthy, big influential family. His
Mhm.
brother was the campaign manager for a state senator here. Um, but he couldn't dress for crap. He couldn't even put colors together. And I redid his whole wardrobe. I threw out all his ties and we went shopping because I said, you can't show up at my office to take me to lunch looking like this.
Hmm.
You just can't. But see, clothes don't really matter. So it doesn't surprise me now that I think of it that she just grabbed something out of her closet and wasn't even aware that it was what she wore. I don't think it was a plan.
Oh, I do. I do.
I don't think so because if that was a plan, if her intent was to confuse people that every time she's on the stand and they don't know which trial she's at, that they're watching, you know, when they
Mhm.
replaying things. So then she would have been more careful about not committing perjury about the drive-by. She said
What?
three different
She
things
did.
in three
She
different
pumped.
trials.
She
So why
perjured
would she?
herself in that
And a
regard.
sociopath would be much more conscious of not wanting to stumble like that than they would be concerned about their attire. But then she might have thought maybe she did plan to be more accurate and say the same thing in three tiles and did use the dress as a subtle form of, I don't really care about
Yeah.
this ordeal. Here I am
Yeah.
again. You get the
I think.
same dress
I
and the
think our
same.
desire. I think our weird desire to somehow just present as if nothing had changed physically overrode anything else. And I think she was just forced to admit that she drove up to the crime scene tape. It
Well,
was even for her. It was ridiculous to try and keep lying about that. You know,
Well, she
once.
would tell a lie. She told a lie on the stand, and then 5 seconds later, well, didn't you drive up to the crime scene? Did you go by the crime scene? No. Didn't you drive up to the crime scene tape? Yes. Hello. 10 seconds
Mhm.
haven't even passed, and you have just committed perjury.
Yep.
And compare that to the trial before, Katy's trials. Lady, you know, they're usually, she does get shaken because sociopaths are usually much more guarded and careful about revealing that, you know, being that stupid. They
Hmm.
usually get all their ducks in a row because that's the fun part, planning, you know, plotting how they're gonna mess with somebody.
Well, she's just not as skilled as she thinks she is. What
Or
she's
she got nervous.
skilled at is
She got
planning.
nervous being in court. Yeah. Well, she does have a very high ego, you know.
Well, yeah, that's for certain.
I just want to brush her hair and then hit her with the hairbrush. I know I'm terrible. Can you hear my dog running around?
No, I can't.
Oh, good. Because she makes a lot of noise and she's running. She's challenging me now.
Pussycat in chat says that you have a beautiful voice, Jamie.
Oh, thank you. I'm just a old lady with a dog. I'm quite a
Smiley,
history. All my
Smiley
friends,
say, sorry, on you go.
all my friends tell me I should write a book. The life I've lived has been. I could make podcasts forever about my life and the people in it and what's happened to me. And all I can say is I'm still standing and living great. So
Then you should do it.
it can be done. You know, you can go through a hell of a lot in life and end up peachy. But you have to want
Literally,
to.
practically everyone has a novel or a podcast in them. Not just
I think
goddamn
so.
Wendy Adelson.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me, well, you should put that on your YouTube channel. You should do podcasts about the things you went through. And I said, I don't want to relive it. I live in now.
Hmm.
I live in the now. I bring the knowledge through all these things. I mean, I've had my siblings one by one steal from my mother and put her in a home, and I had to help her get out and get her home back in her name. I mean, I've had my ex-husband put him through med school, work to get him through, and then 9 years after he divorced me, became a crackhead, and I had to pay for the kid's college. I mean, I've had so many things that my brother beat me up when I found out he stole money from mom, put me in the hospital. I'd have my shoulder rebuilt. I mean, so many things. It's kind of
Uh,
like I feel like I'm a Pollyanna walking through life, and every asshole in the world has managed to find me and try to destroy me. But I'm still standing, and I'm
well,
happy.
there
And
you
I
go.
have the greatest kids, greatest grandkids. They think I hung the moon. Every time I go over, my son just built a big new house. And every time I go over there, the door is like 10 feet tall. It's one of those, those huge doors on those big houses.
Yeah.
And this little kid opens the door, little Avery, who's turned 4. He opens the door. Granny Jenny, you gotta come to my room first. It's my birthday. You come to my room with me.
Hmm.
They all want me to go in their room, and I feel like a movie star or a rock
Mhm.
star. You know,
Awesome.
it's, so if I had to go through all that crap to get here, I'm glad I did.
Mm. Well, see, the person that you become is the victory through all the battles in the past. You know, that's
Well,
what it's all about.
the only advice I have for people who are victims of people like the Adelsons and the jerks that I've run into is, if you just move away from them, don't seek vengeance, just disappear from their lives. Just
Mm.
totally black out. They are not in your life anymore. And I don't have any vengeance, that they are who they are is satisfying enough for me, you know?
Yeah, you see that's the tragedy in some circumstances when people become victims of people like that is that it can have a long-term effect on their own life going forward. You know, the damage done can be hard for some people to recover from.
And it
And
is hard. You have
that's
to
what would
do
be
the work.
really tragic.
Yeah, and then when you fall temptation to get even, there is no
Mm-hmm.
getting even with these people. They're
Mm-hmm.
so evil and so destructive. There's no way you're going to get even. And if you did do something to think you were getting even, you wouldn't really end up satisfied by it, and you'd probably end up in a lot worse situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's just no point. That's why no vengeance, no retaliation, no regrets.
Your vengeance will be your success. That will be your vengeance, you know.
Well, the fact that I'm so much happier, and one of my sisters who really abused my mom, um, I found out recently that she has Alzheimer's.
Oh
My
dear.
son told me, Aunt Sue has Alzheimer's. I said, well, that's really too bad. And he goes, you aren't happy about it? I said, well, no, I would not wish that on anybody because my dad died of it.
Mm.
But, you know, she's not in my life, so I don't really care. But, oh, well, kind of, my dad died of Alzheimer's. And my dad protected my mom like crazy. I think his vengeance from heaven was to give her Alzheimer's. Well, leave the vengeance to dad. He took care of that one. That's good. I got that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I sure hope vengeance visits Wendy because there is no doubt in my mind that she is the real deal. She is a true monster. And, I've been covering the Sarah Boone case quite a lot as well over the
Hmm.
last few months.
Yeah, boy.
And it's kind of interesting looking at the contrast between the two of them because obviously Sarah Boone is charged with second degree murder. And when I think about the differences between those two people, it kind of maddens me a little bit. I mean, I know a lot of people have will disagree with my view on that case on Sarah Boone, but just the thought that she could be literally convicted for murder and someone like Wendy may not be
Yeah.
um,
That's not
would be
good. Yeah.
such a ludicrous injustice. I
Well,
don't think Sarah will be, though. You know, I do think she won't be found guilty of that, but it could happen.
well, you never know. I was the foreman on a jury for a tobacco case, and everybody thought they knew what, because it's a tobacco company. You hate them, right? They're obviously
Yeah.
the plaintiff's going to win, but this plaintiff just didn't have the facts on her side, and I was the foreman. And the other thing that influenced the jury was the attorney for the plaintiff was so obnoxious. And he must have somehow gotten wind that I was the foreperson, because he came and stood in front of me and he was actually yelling when he was talking about her cancer caused by the, and screaming at me right in my face, almost spitting on me. And after the first day, we got back in the jury room and the other jurors are going, "Holy crap, are you okay? What was that?" And he did it for 5 more days.
Wow.
And by he could have said he was representing Jesus Christ himself, and that jury would have voted for tobacco companies. I mean, because he was so obnoxious. So attorneys also have. So if Sarah Boone's attorney is as deft and diligent as Georgia, there's a chance she could be not guilty.
Yeah, that might be the problem, unfortunately.
Well, she's had 50 attorneys or something.
She's what?
Hasn't she had a big change of attorney
Yeah.
staff?
I mean, I think she's on her 7th attorney now. I mean, clearly Sarah is difficult to work with, and I don't think many attorneys want to deal with her.
Well, I think her behavior problems aren't in the same category or degree as Wendi Adelson's.
No, for sure. For sure. I mean, sometimes it sounds too simple to just state the fact that what Wendi continued to say and has said ever since is just simply the truth, that she did not intend this. That sounds too simple to say sometimes, but it does not mean it's not true. And it doesn't change the fact that her personality is as it is, which I think makes it very hard for people to kind of wanna back her and wanna believe her. But in my mind, she did not intend his death.
Yeah,
So
but Sarah Boone has a very specific behavior,
yeah,
personality structure that
yeah,
isn't really well understood or tolerated by others. Not
right.
to the degree. I think it's down a different highway than Wendi Adelson's, but you're people that aren't socialized well often end up getting the short end of a stick in a situation like hers, because when they find you disagreeable, they will just automatically care less about the issue you're facing and be more willing to just dismiss you and disregard you and put you away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the trial apparently is coming up in May, and according to the current judge, will not be postponed again. So I, for one, cannot wait to see that trial. And
Yeah, it's been years.
it's been 4 years. It'll be over 4 years by the time trial comes around. So
Though, Rabid, when I first heard of that case, I just heard a snippet of, a woman zips her lover in a suitcase and throws him down the stairs. And I thought, what's your defense going to be?
right.
Sex play gone bad? I mean, who puts people in a suitcase?
It's so
I
bizarre
never
and
in my
unique.
life thought of doing that.
Right.
There's some things that are just so abnormal and obtuse to the rest of the world that we just look at her and go, what mind created that idea? Yikes.
Yep. Right. And it's my perception that some people don't go much further than that, though, right? Just the mere fact of what on earth in a suitcase? Zipped him up in a suitcase? Okay, case closed.
Yeah, because they're impatient and they don't really care. They don't know her. It's
Right.
not their daughter. So it's just kind of, and some people just like to have an opinion about anything. And it doesn't matter if it's very well thought out. They just like to have one.
Yeah,
And so they may not care enough about it to have an informed opinion.
that's exactly it. But
You know,
some of
people
us
are
like to delve
manipulated.
deeper, right?
Yeah, it's nothing is simple when you get into court. You know,
Hmm.
everything is so open to interpretation and so fragile.
Indeed.
But Georgia will. I trust and hope and pray that Georgia will get Wendi Adelson in the stand.
I think she will, because they can't just casually name someone an unindicted conspirator without good reason. And I'm sure that you're right, that there's a whole bunch of evidence that we're not aware of yet.
Yeah.
She's definitely going to get arrested, guys. I'm
Well, and
sure of
people
it.
have said things. People have said things like that Charlie statement to Katy. What if somebody went into the cops and said, I know my brother did it. I know my brother killed him.
Mhm,
That's a
mhm,
specific weird reference when talking about the bump
mhm.
that implies that Wendi would go to the cops and say Charlie did it. And what did Wendi do? First name out of her mouth in that interview was
Charlie.
my brother. My brother. Well, and
Smiley and Smiley and chat is noticing my unfortunate pun with case closed. It's almost impossible to avoid puns in the Sarah Boone case,
I
unfortunately.
love puns. My mom loved puns. She got me hooked on them. I always think of her when my sons give me a pun. But I went up to my sons at the birthday party. One of them, the youngest, and he's sweet Sam. He's the sweetest. He's really got a real soft heart for others.
Hmm.
And I said, "What would you do if my other son, my oldest son, has been divorced and he's now remarried happily, and the divorce was amicable. It was great, because we do that way." But so I said, "What would you do if I said we have to kill Alex's ex-wife? What would you do?" He said, "I'd take you to a psychiatrist and have you committed." So and because that's
Good
what normal
answer.
people do.
Good
Well, because
answer.
that's what normal people would do
That's the
when
thing
you
about this case, that so many of them went along with this in one
well, to
family.
have the idea. I mean, there were times I was so careful never to talk badly about my ex, although there was a myriad of material there, and but I never actually even said, "Oh, I could kill him." I never said those words.
Hmm.
There was a lot of eye rolling, but I never put into words what I'd like to do to him. I'd like him to just straighten up and fly right and pay me all the money that he owes me.
Well, I guess Wendy did say those words. Donna surely did.
But then nobody in their whole cabal said, "Stop. This is nuts.
That's the
This
thing.
is crazy. What
What
are
kind
we
of
talking about?"
family? How can a family be capable of that?
I mean, my son's first response was, "I'd have you seen by a psychiatrist and then lock you up. I'd have you committed. That's
Mm,
nuts." And I
mm.
said, "Well, there's this murder case."
Yeah.
But none of us are all the way absolutely perfectly normal.
Well, not
But
quite. Not quite.
but most people are aware enough to know and want to improve. You know, you learn
That is
by
the key.
mistake, and
That's the
then
key,
you
Jamie.
then you apply the learned knowledge and hopefully become a better person.
Hmm.
You
Hey,
know.
hey, Muppets is in chat saying hi to us
Oh, hi,
all.
Muppets. How are you, darling? I can't really see the chat because I'm on my phone and I can't see
Yeah.
anything. I am so self-conscious about my typos because I have real severe vision issues all my life, and I just had cataract surgery, but they can't get my glasses right to where I can read. So when I'm typing on my phone, I think I'm hitting the right letters, but I can't see that I'm not.
Well,
So
I've not
I end
noticed
up,
any. I've not noticed any
well,
typos.
there's just everything I type has a typo, and I'm usually a very precise person. I care
Hmm.
about accuracy, so I embarrass myself, but I'm gonna get these glasses right, and then I can't work on the computer. I can't see
Hmm.
my phone. I have to walk across the room with my new glasses on to read anything that's on the TV screen. It's
Mm.
crazy. But this too shall pass.
Needs must, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If this is the only thing I have to deal with, thank you, Lord, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There are
I can.
much worse things. I could have zipped somebody in a suitcase.
Right, it could be worse.
That's
That's
so bizarre. I just can't get my mind around that, Rabid. What were you thinking?
they
Huh.
apparently they just had a habit of playing this dumb game, hiding in ridiculous places. I mean, and I do truly believe that this was just a perfect storm where all the dominoes just happened to fall at the same on the same night that night, and she woke up to him dead, and you
Yeah,
know,
that's very likely, but that's kind of an abnormal life that this is a
well,
routine kind of
they
play.
had an abnormal life. They were
It's hard to relate
she
to.
she was a bona fide alcoholic.
Oh, there you go.
Um,
There you go.
they both drank a lot. They were kind of known in the neighborhood as being the out there alkies. I don't know if he was as much, but he certainly drank a lot, and they fought a lot, and they were both in and out of. They were both arrested a few times for domestic violence between the two of them. They were just careering down the whole time, and then it culminated in this disaster, I believe, that night.
Well, I
Um,
wish you'd had my father. I wish a lot of people had had my parents. My dad used to say, excess in anything will not lead to anything good. Balance in all things. So go ahead and drink. He was a drinker. He liked alcohol. Go
mm,
ahead and drink. Just don't drink to excess. You
mm.
know, if you're going to be a jerk, make it little. Don't make it big. you know, don't be a
That's a
big jerk.
great line. That's a great line, actually. Excess in anything is not good.
It doesn't end well. Yeah. Yeah. He was a smart guy.
Smiley says, Rabbit, I am in agreement. I don't know why or how, but I think you're correct. I'll take that, Smiley. I'll take that.
Well, we'll find out, won't we? It'll be hopefully this year.
Hopefully,
Hopefully
hopefully.
in a couple months. Yeah.
If it doesn't go ahead this time in May, I'm officially giving up on that case.
Well, there's lots of justices that aren't ever answered for, and
Mhm.
but I'm really hoping and praying that Wendi gets let out of court in cuffs someday.
That needs to happen.
It does. It really
It
does
really
because
does.
Dan, she maligned him so unfairly, and oh, every day she always said he mistreated me. No, he outshined you.
Yeah, he kicked your ass in court, is what he did.
Well,
And
but
he
even
was,
before that, when she got unhappy with her
oh, yeah.
marriage, was because she wasn't the star. She'd always been
Right.
the star. And here's this guy who's more accomplished, smarter, better liked, more
More
impressive. They
popular.
didn't even want to hire her at Florida
Mhm.
State, but they did to get him there.
That's right. It's like she was basically working there through him.
Yes, they wouldn't have hired her on her own.
Yep.
And she didn't go get another teaching job, and she had to rely on a family friend for her next job. And, she's not an accomplished person. And so Dan didn't mistreat her. He just outshined her,
Mhm.
which is easy to do because she's a nut job.
Mhm. She really is.
No, she's scared. She's very scary. This case is so interesting because I lived the nightmare on the other side of the fence as a sociopath with a sociopath. Anna, stop. She is Anna Hope. Sit. I named her Anna Hope. And I hope she learns how to mellow out, and I hope she stops chewing, and I
I
hope she
hope I get it.
will settle down. Yeah, yeah. But it's triggering a lot of memories for me watching
Mm.
Wendi.
It will do for a lot of people. Like I said earlier, like these people are not aliens. People will recognize some of the behavior and actions and traits, and I think that's why I think that's why it means something to a lot of people in true crime. Some of these cases, you know, it can be quite
Yeah.
cathartic to see like an absolute monster like this. Hopefully,
Yeah,
get
but
justice.
I'm lucky enough time's gone by. It was like 9 years ago that I was done with that nonsense. So I'm lucky in that the familiarity that this brings doesn't hurt at all. It doesn't keep me up at night.
Yeah,
I'm
that's a
not
good
reliving
point.
it. I'm just going, see, other people live with these jackasses too. And
Yeah.
stop biting my slippers. She's biting my slippers. I should put her on camera. You are a monster. Good. She went outside. Ha. Okay. I can talk now. Anyway, I'm glad you're covering this. And you do such a good job on the cases you cover. I really enjoy you.
Well, if once I'm really interested in a case, I can't help but dive into it pretty deeply, and this one has my attention for sure for a whole bunch of reasons. And the fact that this story is not over,
Oh
not
no,
by a
that was
long
long.
way yet. This
No, I
is
think Harvey might be pulled in too. But on the
yeah,
day that Wendi gets convicted, well, you'll have to on your channel. You'll have to have a a bon voyage Wendy, you sociopath party.
yeah. I would find it hard to resist that. She is a beast.
Yeah, I don't
Her.
usually like to celebrate other people's bad experiences, but I'm
Well,
I'll go buy champagne for this one, and I don't drink.
right. On behalf
I,
of the human
I love them.
race, it'd be worth celebrating.
I don't drink alcohol anymore. I had a friend die from alcoholism, and I tried to save her and didn't work, so I quit drinking
Hmm.
years ago. But on Wendy, on the day she gets convicted, I'm gonna go
Hard to
get a little
resist.
prosecco. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
gonna have some prosecco over here.
yeah. Or you could get a non-alcoholic bubbly, and still celebrate.
Well, I don't really mind it. I never had a problem with alcohol. It's just kind of after my shoulder surgery, my taste buds changed.
Hmm.
And I used to actually really be a wine connoisseur person, that rich sociopath. We went to wine tastings at all the wineries. We traveled all the
Yeah.
time to go to wineries. And I always drank really great, expensive wines. And I could pick up a glass of wine and tell you what grapes made it, if it was a Merlot grape or, I was really quite enjoying
Hmm.
becoming knowledgeable.
Connoisseur.
About it. But then after my surgery, my neighbor came over and she said, "You need a glass of wine," and poured me my favorite. My favorite is Barolo from Italy. It's a deep, deep red, and I just love that wine. And it's really expensive if it's
Hmm.
done well. And so she went and bought a Barolo and poured a glass, and it tasted like rotten grape juice. It was awful.
Really? Oh
And
dear.
I thought something happened. So my son, he said that anesthesia has been known to change certain things, and it's not uncommon for people to say things taste differently after they've gone under anesthetic.
Hmm.
And he's a doctor, so I believe him.
I did not know
Isn't that something? Because I said, why can't I? After my mom passed, the kids we all went out to dinner, and my son ordered me a glass of wine, and I took a sip of it, and I go, God. And that was 2 years after my surgery. I was like, this is swill. I go, no, Mom, it's really a good wine.
that.
Can't drink it. What's wrong with my mouth? Is it ever going to come back? So I just accept it. I don't really need alcohol.
That's annoying though.
Well, my dad told me never drink alone. And I
Mm.
live alone. And I don't think Anna's going to pop a bottle open. So I'm
Hmm.
kind of stuck, I follow the
Mm.
rules. Never drink alone.
Hmm.
But I don't miss it really. I think I drank enough in my life. If there's a quota, I'm sure I hit it.
Well, for Wendy, I think an exception can be made. In my
Yeah,
mind.
yeah, and it will be. But for her to lie about her drinking, I don't know anything about alcohol. I never drink. And then Lacoste said she drank her dinner most nights. It's a direct quote.
Hmm.
Drank her dinner
Hmm.
most nights. Wow. Even I never drank like that.
Hmm. Well, that will catch up with her.
Well, and it's interesting that sociopaths, they don't use alcohol like other people do. Some people, use it to make as a social buffer or to relax them so they're more comfortable in social situations. But most sociopaths have no trouble imbibing and sometimes excessively imbibing in booze. They very much like alcohol. And I don't know that it affects them the same. I watched that guy drink a lot, and it
Mm-hmm.
never seemed to affect his personality,
Oh,
which was
really?
another eye opener into sociopathy, because that's pretty,
Oh.
like I get more giddy or more silly, and I laugh louder when I drink, you
So you're
know.
telling me some sociopaths are such sociopaths that they're immune to some of the symptoms of alcohol that others are. Wow.
Alcohol doesn't affect their personality structure. It may
Wow.
affect their liver and their kidneys, and it may make them walk, uneven or something, but it may affect
That
them
their
physically.
personality traits are not affected.
Yeah, because alcohol really doesn't. My experience is it made me feel more comfortable socially and more
Mm-hmm.
relaxed. And so, I mean, I was never inappropriate, but it's not like you're in a corporate business meeting. You
Mm-hmm.
So I always thought alcohol was kind of made
Oh
social things.
yeah, I suppose alcohol really like there has to already be problems there, right? So it tends to exaggerate what's
Yeah,
going on in someone. So if someone's got some anger issues, then it's gonna exaggerate that. I
right.
guess if someone has the traits of an asshole, like a sociopath, then it's gonna exaggerate that
Yeah,
potentially.
and the anger, you got to remember that little emotional bag, that bag of emotions that sociopaths carry has maybe 3 or 4 in it. But
Mm-hmm.
the biggest piece in that bag is anger.
Mm.
If you can get, if Georgia, I'm telling you, if she can get Wendi angry on the stand, it's a
Could be key.
win-win.
Could be
That's
key.
the thing. Hopefully, I'll come back on when we celebrate her convictions.
Okay, that's a deal, Jamie. Thank you so much for coming up. This has been really interesting conversation. It was really that's a lot of food for thought, actually. Your thoughts about just how much premeditation perhaps went on with Wendy in this. It's a
Well,
good argument.
this case has something for everyone, and it has a lot of everything for everyone
It does.
because these people are so extreme.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, they're so
yeah.
extreme that every time I'm still surprised when that some cross before can still make me feel gobsmacked.
Mm,
Wow, really?
yeah.
Oh yeah, but
I
it's the
know.
Adelsons. Okay. Yeah. That's what makes it so interesting, and that in my lover's heart, I want Dan to be vindicated by her.
Mm,
I really do,
yeah.
because he was a really great guy. I don't see him as being impossible or hard to deal with, and he certainly never abused her. He treated me so. My parents knew he treated me badly. No, he just was better than you at everything.
Once
And
there's so much evidence of Wendy's gross personality and her lies, then the default position to take is just not to believe a single word that comes out of her mouth. You
yeah,
know?
she's a consummate pathological liar.
Hmm.
She even admitted it to Jeff Lacasse. That blows my mind. He said, she told me, I have always lied about everything and I don't really know why. Wow.
Yeah.
I have always tried not to lie. In fact, when I was little, I took extra packages of lunch snacks and my mom got mad at me and asked me if I did it. And I was so afraid I'd get in trouble. I said no. And she sat me on her lap and she said, honey, I'm going to tell you this. Remember this the rest of your life. You're a very bad liar. You're not good at it. You'll never fool anybody. Whenever you try to lie, everybody will always know you're lying because you're so bad at it.
Mm,
So give it
yeah.
up. You can't, liar is not in your bag of tricks. So don't lie because you'll just have an awful lot because you'll be found out every time. Now, later she told me, I told that to every one of the kids. That's the way you set somebody up to be more honest. I suck at lying, so if I'm going to embarrass myself, I better not lie or people going to call me a liar,
Mm,
And so I really did for years. I believe I really suck at lying. I can't fool anybody. you know. But it worked, you know. She had all these
Mhm.
parenting tips that actually worked. But I thought
Yeah,
that was
this is
funny.
the thing about Wendy. I think in her everyday life, she was a convincing liar for sure. I think it's just under the circumstances, being in court and us knowing what we know, it's obvious that she's lying. But
Well, and she really leans hard on her sexuality too to influence people.
mm,
You know, she acts
yeah,
very flirty and acts very coy, and she knows how to, and
and
then,
those trying to do those doughy eyes and things on her
mm, God, I want to hit her.
eyelashes.
I want to hit her when she gets that face.
Yeah.
Nobody's that innocent. You're a bad
Hmm.
actress. Yeah, she's just, but she does. That's what even, I mean, Jeff Lacasse even said, I'm still under her spell. I'd probably go back to her today, even though I think she tried to set me up. You're like, dude,
Well,
that's some heavy hitting sexual and
he's a
emotional
funny
manipulation.
he's a funny guy though as well, and he's very self-evasive and
Yes.
charismatic. I'm sure he wouldn't, right? But
Now,
um,
did I see a wedding ring on his hand during the trial? I hope
I
so.
don't know.
I'm hoping he's happily married and has some kids and he's got a woman who just treasures him, because he is a really good guy.
Yeah,
Those
he
two were,
seems, despite it all, he does seem very happy and content and together. So usually that means
well, I
they're
think he's
happy.
really intelligent. And I think
Oh yeah.
smart people navigate these kind of situations a little better than the rest of us.
Mm.
And I think he pretty much came to a lot of awareness pretty quickly about Wendy, but he was so deep in because of her manipulation through her sexuality. He even said she uses
Mhm.
her sexuality.
Well, he wanted to believe the best in her, I guess.
Well, don't
She
we
was
all when we
very.
start dating somebody, we always want to believe the best.
We do. We sure do. And I mean, she had a lot going for her superficially. She's fairly attractive, I guess. She had a really good paying job. She was young. There
She's
was a
good
lot of
on paper.
reasons for him to want to believe in her.
She's good on paper, Robin.
It's good
Good
on
on paper.
exactly. That's the way to put it on paper.
Yeah, but you can't
Monster
live
underneath it all.
you can't live with a piece of paper.
You cannot. No.
Okay, well, thank you so much for letting me come up. I hope I haven't monopolized everything, and
You're
I had a very
welcome.
nice time. And always my highest regards to you, Rabbit.
And to you. Thank you, Jamie. This has been great. We got into some pretty cool um, topics on this. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Whatever I could add, not much, but so fascinated by this case. Anyway,
Yeah,
take
me
care.
too. All right, Jamie. Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye bye bye. Wow, that was great. Yeah, it's good to speak to someone that clearly knows their shit on this. So I think I'll leave playing Jeff's testimony until next time. I want to go through Jeff's testimony and I want to go through the interview with Tamara Demco and some more of Wendy's testimony, and then eventually I want to go through some of Katy's, which is just unbelievable. Watching Katy Magbanowa being cross-examined is a treat, guys. But yeah, I think this was a pretty good summary of the reasons to believe that Wendy has a reason to be in court and being tried for this case, to be tried for murder. And it's with the assumption that there surely has to be more evidence coming from the prosecution. But even with what we know, we can certainly paint a picture that's very damning of Wendi. And we have Donna's trial coming up, which will reveal more, I imagine. So we shall leave that till next time. And thanks as always, everyone that's been in here. I know true crime, especially on my channel, doesn't quite grab the attention like other content does, but we shall plod through that and find new viewers, I guess. But thanks to everyone that's been here and taken part. It's appreciated, and I hope this was informative, especially for some of you guys that are just beginning to dive into this most horrendous case. So good night, everyone, and I shall speak to you soon. Let's play out with some music, shall we?